Chapter 1376. Let bygones be bygones. We already showed them our goodwill, but they're actually still not satisfied yet. Zhao Jun took in a deep breath. In order to help boss increase the amount of bargaining chips he had, Lin Zonking packaged all of the good stuff from Lingshan's warehouse. Of course, even if he hadn't done that, Qilong and Han Jijian would have made the decision to do so. If they thought it was not enough, they would have asked the military headquarters for more. Even if the military headquarters didn't give it to them, Qilong could still ask his father for them. This shameless way of doing things was completely inherited from boss. It could be considered a tradition within Lingshan. If you can swallow more, then why not do so? In the end, it's just a game between us, Ling Lance said calmly. Troublesome. Luo Lang rubbed the back of his head annoyingly. Without the calm personality by his side, his brain was really useless in everything except for motor skills. However, it seemed little Lang hadn't come out in a long while. Luo Lang was somewhat worried about him. He didn't know if something had happened to him and whether everything was alright. Hey, at least he still has the conscience to think of you. After sensing the thought of the primary personality, the evil personality smiled devilishly towards the calm personality. He's always been good, said the calm personality. Recently, the evil personality had been restricting him from leaving his side. He had already expected this to happen when he called upon the evil personality, which was why he wasn't furious about his current situation. Plus, the primary personality wasn't in any danger, so the calm personality just let him do as he pleased. What you said is so annoying. The evil personality's gaze turned ice cold. The two of them were always on the opposite side, constantly suppressing each other. The evil personality always thought the calm personality was the most important person in his life. He was his opponent, but also brother. However, the person who entered his heart put someone else in his heart. Although the said person was their master on paper, in the eyes of the evil personality, that primary personality was too weak in his eyes. Just what qualifications did he have for the evil personality to think of him as his master? When will you understand? The calm personality drew a long sigh. The primary personality's truthfulness and honesty did indeed draw the calm personality towards him. In the time he stood by Luo Lang's side as he grew up, Luo Lang had respected each of his personalities as an actual person who had the right to make their own decisions. He treated them like his own flesh and blood. How could the calm personality not sense the sincerity he showed them? In the end, he wholeheartedly and willingly wanted to help Luo Lang until he climbed to the top. However, before all that, what made him willing except being a servant wasn't the primary personality's sincerity but instead, it was Boss Ling Lan. That person, once angered, might be able to kill them even if all the personalities went against him all at once. I don't need to understand. I just know that he isn't qualified, said the evil personality in an annoyed tone. Whatever you want. The calm personality didn't want to speak any further. Some things could only be known after someone experienced it. The evil personality wouldn't believe anything he said right now anyways. The two personalities became silent once again. On the outside world, Ling Lan turned towards Tang Ninu and Mu Karen. She raised her eyebrows slightly. Also, why are you two here? Tang Nina snorted coldly. What? We're not welcomed? Mu Karen was smiling slightly. We've missed you. After all, we were friends once. Ling Lan smirked and said, it's probably because you received a mission to come find me, but didn't have any leads, so you could only shamelessly stay around Lingshan to hitch a ride. Tang Ninu and Mu Karen blushed after hearing Ling Lan blatantly exposing them. Mu Karen then got even more shameless and said, oh man, if you knew, why did you have to make it so obvious? At least save some face for us. Just tell me, who gave the order for you to track me? Ling Lan wasn't going to fall for that. She just wanted to know what she wanted to know. Ling Lan's attitude forced Mu Ken's smiling face back. He quickly got stern. Flying Dragon Special Forces highest commanding officer, General Ren. Ling Lan was surprised. She only heard about his person once from her father. When her father mentioned their relationship with each other, it didn't seem that good. Now a person, who had an average relationship with her father, suddenly ordered Tang Ninu and Mukan to find her. What was he planning? Was he an enemy or ally, or perhaps he had some evil plot in mind? Ling Lan knew very well that he must have discovered that the two of them had worked with her before, so he sent them to her. These two had some relationship with her, making it easier for them to locate her. Her father's planned assassination forced Ling Lan to be very guarded against everyone from the Federation's military headquarters. That was why she couldn't help but doubt their intentions after seeing Tang Ninu and Mukan arrive. Seeing Ling Lan's surprise, Zhao Jun quickly walked up and told her about how the chief of the Flying Dragon Special Forces, General Ren, helped Qi Long to acquire the commander position of the Lingshan Independent Army, along with the fact that he spoke out to support Lan Luofan to be the 23rd Division's stand-in general. After hearing all that, it seemed that this chief of the Flying Dragon Special Forces should be her father's friend, or perhaps someone who was really friendly with him. If so, then it might just be as Mukan and Tang Nina had said. That person was only worried about her, so he sent them solely to protect her. There was too little information for Ling Lan to rely on to have an accurate idea of what General Ren was planning to do. She could only put a large question mark on General Ren's face for now. Ling Lan would never lower her guard against someone just because he had helped her in some way. When she didn't have any evidence to confirm it, Ling Lan would be guarded against anyone, including Tang Ninu and Mukan. All of you should return to Jialan ship now. There might be people probing us out tonight. After deciding it was not worth her time to think about such matters right now, Ling Lan promptly gave the four of them orders. Yes, and you two will follow as well. Ling Lan suddenly pointed to the side where Jiming and Yu Shangfei had been wallflowers for a long time. Yes, Lord Zhen. The two of them immediately accepted the order. Just then, the two of them were carefully studying the three new underlings their master had gained. Luo Tan, who they had already seen before, was a titled domain realm master just like them. They had thought someone with monstrous talent like Luo Tan was only an outlier, so they were quite shocked to see that they were actually three more individuals who were not any weaker than Luo Lang. They were at most only just a tiny bit weaker. Compared to Jiming's mild shock, Yu Shangfei was more unsettled. After all, he did something similar to betrayal when Lord Zhen was in danger. He was afraid Lord Zhen would remember that and deal with him afterwards. So, he really didn't expect Lord Zhen to not punish them, but instead, sending them on a mission. Yu Shangfei breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for Lord Zhen's attitude of letting bygones be bygones. Chapter 1377 Oath. The clock struck midnight in the Rainbow Palace, signaling for those weary that it was time for bed. Even when multiple homes turned off their lights to prepare for their slumber, the Rainbow Palace was still lit up as bright as day. Often, patrol would be seen doing their duties around the palace. However, today was an exception. Halls, rooms, corridors, all empty with no one in sight. Although such a scene would usually be indicative of misfortune befalling, today was a celebratory day, as everyone in the palace was relieved from their duties for the night. Family members who usually worked during graveyard shifts were able to spend some quality time with their families and create everlasting memories together. For those with no family, it was still a glorious day, as sleep would be their number one priority for the night. These times of happiness were ordered by one person, Lord Zhen, who was in a great mood for the whole day. Although no one understood why Lord Zhen made such a decision, no one would be mad about not working, and thus after being notified of their leave, the servants and guards all happily packed their bags and went home. The only exceptions were the leaders of the patrol and guardians who were taken by Jiming and Yu Shangfei to defend Jialan ship. Ling Lan sat on the ice throne in the main hall with her right hand holding her forehead as she closed her eyes slightly. This whole scene created a picturesque image of a lonely king racking his brain to think of ways to improve the environment his subjects were living in. On her crossed leg, Little White was there flopping on its belly while sleeping with its tentacles pointed in different directions. A drop of morning dew was hanging on for dear life near the corner of its lips. When the liquid was about to drop, Little White instinctively sucked in forcefully to get it back into its mouth. Right at that moment, at the certain area of the main hall, A green plant suddenly emerged from the marble flooring. In the blink of an eye, it grew to the height of a man and then slowly changed into the figure of Silhouette. There stood a man with a pristine green cape with vines interwoven between each thread. His pitch-black hair naturally flowed down from his head to the back of his neck. The man stood there quietly before lifting his head, parting the hair that was covering his face to reveal a strong chiseled jaw with sharp eyebrows complementing his already cat-like eyes. He didn't look any older than someone in his early 30s. He had a slight smirk on the corner of his lips. He exuded a warm and fresh aura to anything and everything around him. With just his presence alone, the cold hall got a few degrees warmer. Sensing a gaze on her, Ling Lan slowly parted her closed eyelids. After seeing the relatively middle-aged man in front of her, Ling Lan wasn't surprised as she spoke out calmly. "I've been waiting for you. What should I be calling you, Lord Keon, or Lord Kun? You knew I was coming?" The middle-aged man said with a surprise in their voice. "You may address me as Lord Kun. With such a massive undertaking by the lawless land, it is obvious that one of you will come and meet me." Ling Lan pushed against the handles of her throne as she slowly sat up straight. "I see why you gave your people a day off." Lord Kun showed a contemplative look on his face. "Isn't that what you want too? I'm only just fully cooperating with you." Ling Lan laughed lightly. Clap, clap, clap. Lord Kun also laughed with her and slowly clapped his hands. "To think Soul Society actually developed someone like you. They are really making me look at them in a different light. To be one of the lords of the lawless lands while being so young is quite impressive as well. In terms of influencing the lawless lands, the 13 lords are doing a much better job than the Soul Society." Ling Lan seemed to be suggesting something. "It's nothing really. I was just lucky enough to be nurtured and developed in the lawless lands," said Lord Kun plainly. Suddenly, Lord Kun's tone turned cold. "With us here, no other faction or organization can have a piece of the lawless lands. If the Soul Society has that kind of thought, I would suggest you turn around and leave." "Lord Kun, you don't need to worry about that. The Soul Society's goal was never the lawless land. We only want to keep a lifeline on the lawless lands, that's all," Ling Lan said without any fear in her tone. "Is that Soul Society's promise?" Elder Kun's eyes shined with a bright green light for a moment. A sliver of his domain concept silently activated. This was the domain technique from the branch of the language concept called oath. Under that concept, a conversation could be made into an oath bound by heaven and earth. Once the oath was broken, heaven and earth would dictate the punishment. How could Ling Lan not have detected it? However, she still gave Lord Kun the oath without hesitation. "That's right. This is the Soul Society's promise. The Soul Society doesn't want to become the ruler of the lawless lands. The Soul Society only wants territory that it could hold in the lawless lands. Is Lord Gen's territory enough?" Lord Kun kept pressing for the oath to be more binding. "Yes, the Soul Society only wants Lord Gen's territory. It is enough." Ling Lan looked straight at him and didn't hesitate one bit. "All right, the oath has been created." Lord Kun's eyes shined green for a moment once again. Then, on both his and Ling Lan's foreheads, the letters spelling out oath appeared. Then, it slowly sank into their heads, symbolizing that their promise was acknowledged by heaven and earth. Lord Kun was very satisfied with how the oath ended up. It was because this oath wasn't not restrictive to them, but only Ling Lan. Ling Lan was nonchalant about it because her oath was made to the 13 lords with the Soul Society's name, not her own. "Tomorrow, the 13 lords will officially announce to the lawless lands for you to take up the position of Lord Gen." Lord Kun finally said the words Ling Lan wanted to hear. "However, on the subject of supplies, you must satisfy our needs." Lord Kun immediately brought up his demands. "We will be responsible for the supplies, but only when money comes to me," replied Ling Lan. In terms of supplies, Ling Lan wasn't actually worried. Firstly, she had the chaotic lands, along with Soul Society's 18th district's governor, Xiaqinyai, helping her to prepare and gather supplies. If Xiaqinyai was smart enough, he would grasp this opportunity to acquire the Soul Emperor's full support. That way, She would actually then be a real representative of the Soul Society on paper. It would also make her deals with the Soul Society become proper. Secondly, on the matter of acquiring high-end weapons and equipment, the Lingshan Independent Army would be able to resolve that if the chaotic clans and the Soul Society were not able to. Thirdly, Ling Lan believed that Little Four would definitely wake up. It was only a matter of time. Once Little Four woke up, she would be able to continue working to build up their corporate empire. When that happened, what wouldn't she be able to do? These 3 points were enough for Ling Lan to have the confidence to accept Lord Kun's conditions. Of course, Ling Lan wasn't some idiot in business. Money that she could make still needed to be made. That's not a problem. Even if we don't have money, we can use items to exchange for them, said Lord Kun as he smiled slightly. It was clear that he didn't want to give money. That's fine, but that price must be lower than the market by half. Ling Lan mercilessly haggled down the price. No way, you're crazy. Lord Kun, of course, wouldn't agree. That condition was like squeezing him dry. We can't do business without money, Ling Lan said calmly. One trip to and fro, no matter if it is manpower or supplies, everything is doubled. The losses I suffered there can only be managed with the money you give me. Hadn't you already made money by bringing in the supplies? Lord Kun said calmly. Don't you have such a large appetite? Otherwise, if you make everyone unhappy, it wouldn't be good for you. 1378. You want to fight? If we're talking business, exchanging items for my supplies is not sustainable for my side. You already know I can't sell the exchanged items for 100% of their value, and selling them at 60 to 70% of their value is already being optimistic, so me accepting the exchanged items at 50% of the value is a reasonable offer. Lord Kun, I'm not trying to cheat you. If any other merchant was in my position, you would have been given an even lower price when it comes to your proposal. Ling Lan was actually quite knowledgeable of the business world. Her eloquent words stunted Lord Kun for a moment. What you say makes sense, but the other lords will not consider 50%. If the Soul Society wants to enter into the lawless lands quickly, you should concede a little. Thinking about the potential profit they could make, Lord Kun got a little excited, but on the surface, he still had a stone-cold expression. You should think about it carefully. Ling Lan massaged her temples, contemplating the offer of Lord Kun. After a few seconds, she finally relented and said, then tell me, Lord Kun, at what price can you accept? Lord Kun calmly said, 80% of the original selling price. Hearing the ridiculous offer, Ling Lan shook her head regretfully. I will lose too much with that price. If this is a short-term deal, it will perhaps be fine, but considering that it is a long-term deal, the Soul Emperor would definitely not agree to that price. You really won't consider it? Lord Kun's eyes sharpened slightly. The temperature of the entire main hall suddenly dropped. Ling Lan stared directly at Lord Kun fearlessly. It's not that I won't agree to it. That price is simply not acceptable to the Soul Emperor. Hearing Ling Lan denying any fault in this failed argument, Lord Kun's expression got even worse. Lord Kun, you should really think where you stand in this deal. I am being nice when I say you should be the conceding party here, not me. Although we do wish to have a place to call our own in the lawless lands, we are not desperate for it. Just think about it. Letting us suffer losses while you reap profit doesn't sound like a good long-term business relationship. Only when both sides profit, we're happy. Don't you think so? Ling Lan said slowly. Lord Kun visibly contemplated for a few seconds before slowly speaking up. Tell me the lowest you can go. Don't go around in circles with me. I only want to hear it straight up. Ling Lan bit her lip in frustration. 70%. That's our limit. When Lord Kun heard that, a small smirk appeared on his face. All right, we'll settle with 70%. Looking at the gloating Lord Kun, Ling Lan suddenly realized she had been fooled. She smiled bitterly. I'm still too naive. It's just as you said, it's better when both of us win. Lord Kun smiled happily. Yeah, it's very good, but I will be punished by the Emperor. Ling Lan helplessly sighed. If the Emperor wants to discipline you, tell him to come find us. Lord Kun gave Ling Lan some empty words to comfort her. Suddenly, He shifted his gaze to the green plant growing in the corner of the frozen hall. He uncontrollably let out a confused sound. I've never seen this species of plant before. Lord Kun instantly teleported next to the plant. He reached towards the plant as he said in a joyful tone. Before his fingers could clamp down to pull a lead off, the green plant suddenly retracted back into the soil before emerging a meter away from him in the soil. It could sense my intentions. Lord Kun's lips curled upwards as he looked curiously towards the green plant. He again reached out with his hand in an attempt to stop the plant from escaping. However, before he knew it, a pale jade-like hand had already lightly held his wrist. Lord Kun, are you that bored to play with my pet? Don't you think that's a bit rude? Ling Lan looked at him with raised eyebrows. Pet? Lord Kun looked at the green plant that had now vanished, with a shocked expression. The presence he felt earlier was clearly of the plant element. Could it be a plant that had a certain degree of intellect? Ling Lan wasn't nice enough to explain to Lord Kun, so she only looked towards Lord Kun indifferently, hoping that he would take his hand back soon. She didn't want him to annoy a little white's clone. What if I must? Lord Kun was a person who wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted, so he obviously wouldn't stop even if Ling Lan told him to stop. Hearing Lord Kun's dominating words, Ling Lan narrowed her eyes. A dangerous presence leaked through her voice as she said coldly, "Perhaps, you want to fight?" The two of them stared at each other coldly. The originally harmonious atmosphere was instantly replaced by a bone-chilling atmosphere as it slowly diffused through the whole hall. Bang! The two of them both expanded their concept energies and sent each other flying backwards. Ling Lan waved the red cloak behind her and landed firmly on the ground. Her right hand had 3 ice spears in it. Lord Kun on the other hand softly landed on the ground. As he landed, the ground below him cracked open to reveal countless of green vines wrapped around each other. The interlocked vines seemed to have come alive as the vines slowly expanded and contracted like a beating heart. The small buds on the surface of the vines slowly blossomed into bright red flowers the size of bowls. Plant concept. What a rare sight. Ling Lan got cautious. The concept instructor number 5 head was similar to what was shown before her. In her spars against instructor number 5, Ling Lan never got ahead of him before. Most of the spars ended with her getting beaten to a pulp by instructor number 5. Such terrible memories about the plant-based concept naturally made Ling Lan and her any person who had the plant concept. You're not too shabby either. You are quite perceptive yourself. Lord Kun believed that his sneak attack was well hidden in the first exchange between them. Other than Lord Keon, any of the lords would have been injured by that. They definitely wouldn't have been like Lan Zhao, who sensed it the moment Lord Kun had made his move. Ling Lan didn't respond to his compliment. She wasn't going to tell him that the reason she was able to sense it quickly was completely because she had a lot of experience dying to sneak attacks infused with the plant concept. After dying so many times, her body had naturally completely memorized the presence of those sneak attacks. Once any sneak attack infused with the plant concept came near her, her body would instinctively escape from it. I have heard a lot about you from Lord Zen, but since we've started already, let me see just how strong you are. Right as Lord Kun finished speaking, the flowers on the vines suddenly increased in size and then began to outwardly grow. Seeing this, Ling Lan immediately leaped off the floor. The place she was standing at originally had already become a wall of ice. Phew! The red flowers suddenly spat out bright red liquid at the ice wall Ling Lan had just formed. Then, a sharp sizzling sound echoed in the area, and the ice wall instantly liquefied into a puddle of red liquid. It's a type of poison concept. The strong poison has the ability to disintegrate domain concepts. Ling Lan's expression tensed up. This ability was quite similar to the disintegration ability of her profound insight concept. However, it was still much different in terms of how they would disintegrate concepts. Her profound insight's concept of disintegration would cause her opponent's domain concept to disintegrate by its own accord and split up in a molecular level. Lord Kun's strong poison concept on the other hand was disintegrating the concept by rearranging his opponent's domain concept structure, causing his opponent's domain concept to be filled with flaws or cracks. Then, the flawed domain concept wouldn't be able to hold together and completely collapse. Despite the two being fundamentally different, they still produce the same results. 1379 Return. Using your ice element concept alone won't be enough against me. I heard a lot of fanfare about your space concept. I really want to witness the so-called invincible space concept. I want to see just how invincible it is under the assault of my plans. Just as Lord Kun finished speaking, his gentle aura turned malicious. Then, he lifted a finger to point at Ling Lan's direction. Ling Lan immediately felt something was not right. Without wondering why, she just jumped off the ground. A crimson bug suddenly emerged from the floor where she was standing at. As the crimson bug crawled out from the ground, it shook its body a little to reveal the razor-thin wings. Seeing Ling Lan flying above it, it let out an ear-piercing screech, revealing its mouth which had rows of teeth much like a meat grinder. It then flew towards Ling Lan at lightning speed with its intimidating teeth. HMPH. Seeing the crimson bug coming towards her, Ling Lan just snorted in response. She flicked her sleeve and multiple green tentacles shot out of her sleeve. Slit-like holes could be seen all over the tentacles, where it housed rows of thin and sharp teeth. There was also still saliva hanging off the teeth. Seeing the revolting bug coming towards them, they weren't frightened by it but instead, they got excited, as if they met their lunch. More saliva started to form in its mouth, but most of it dripped on the ground which corroded a huge area. Screech, roar. When the two monsters faced off against each other, they started taking mouthfuls of each other's body. Screech, roar. The two monsters continued to bite each other ruthlessly. Everything depended on which one was stronger. Only the strong were able to devour their opponent. At this moment, one could even hear the sound of chewing, which sounded exceptionally eerie in the empty main hall. After Ling Lan released Little White's clone, she disregarded the crimson bug. She landed on the ground lightly and placed her red cloak over her shoulder. They were like her red wings as they glided down slowly along with her. Along with her arrogant and domineering aura, she looked like an emperor looking down on her subjects. Lord Kun suddenly had this gut-wrenching feeling from the depths of his body. He felt shame, ashamed that he had intruded on the territory of a king, and fearful of what was about to come. However, the feeling only lasted for a fleeting moment. But, before he could analyze these emotions, Ling Lan flicked her fingers with her outstretched hands. In an instant, an overwhelming amount of ice needles were formed densely in the air, and with a snap of a finger, they flew towards Lord Kun like the rain in a storm. Simple tricks. Lord Kun scoffed. He placed his palms together and his body immediately sunk into the ground like a plant. Phew, phew, phew. The ice needles pierced the marble flooring like a pincushion. Suddenly, Ling Lan's entire body suddenly shattered into ice shards. Vines with glowing red flowers could be seen shattering through all the ice. After the vines missed their target, they fell heavily onto the ground cracking the marble floor into tiny pieces. What a pity. Behind the spot where Ling Lan was standing, a plant had grown out from the ground. In an instant, it turned into Lord Kun. 2 failed sneak attacks. His instinct is really amazing. Lord Kun carefully scanned around him. He wanted to find where Ling Lan was hiding. He carefully took a step forward. Suddenly, his expression froze as he could feel something brushing his legs. Lord Kun remained motionless. His eyes slowly got tainted with green. With the help of the Eye of Plant, he finally saw what he felt. It was a thin and almost invisible thread laid horizontally in front of him. This was the thread that his leg touched. Lord Kun raised his head to carefully look at the area near him. Under a certain lighting angle, he could see threads covering the main hull from the right to the left, forming a huge web. Unexpectedly, he had become the prey of the web. A figure slowly appeared in the air to show Ling Lan crossing her arms in front of her chest. There was a transparent thread linked to each of her fingers. Without a doubt, the creator of this huge web was Ling Lan. "I didn't expect you to have such a technique," Lord Kun said with a stern face. Every Imperial Realm formidable warrior had their own signature Imperial technique. They would rarely be used until the final moment. Just based on this huge and frightening presence, as well as the powerful threat he felt from the web, Lord Kun had reasons to believe that this was Lan Zhao's Imperial technique. If I didn't have this ace up my sleeve, how would I have been chosen to come here? Ling Lan replied with a calm expression before tightly clenching her fist. The threads in the main hall started to enclose on Lord Kun from all directions. Break! Lord Kun waved his hands and numerous vines burst out from the floor below him. Then, they attacked the threads crazily. The two parties started fighting bloodily. Either the red flower vines got minced by the threads or the threads were torn apart by the vines. The battle would only end when one party depleted all of their domain concept's energy. Ling Lan watched as her threads got lesser and lesser slowly. As for Lord Kun's vines, there seemed to be an infinite number of them. New ones kept appearing to replace the ones that died. This was an expected result as Lord Kun was more powerful than her. No wonder he was one of the figureheads of the 13 Lords. His strength was indeed a tier above the other members of the 13 Lords. One Lord Kun was already powerful. Then, how powerful was Lord Keon, who was rumored to be in the God Realm? The more she understood about the Imperial Realm, and the closer she got to God Realm, Ling Lan got a deeper understanding of how scary God Realm was. When she was young and naive in the past, she just knew that her master was powerful. She would at most think that her master was only a little more powerful than her father. This naive perception remained until she became a titled domain formidable warrior. But, after she smuggled herself into Planet General to meet her mother with the help of her master, was when she finally understood how frightening God Realm was. At that time, even though her master was standing in front of her, she was completely oblivious to her presence. When he revealed himself, the sense of danger she felt then was terrifying. Her profound insight told her clearly that if her master was her enemy, she must run away immediately as far as she could. When an Imperial Realm formidable warrior met a God Realm formidable warrior, the only thing she could do was run. This showed how frightening God Realm was. The God Realm was definitely unbelievable in the range of human capabilities. Honestly, Ling Lan thought becoming an Imperial Realm formidable warrior was already an unbelievable feat, but at least an Imperial Realm formidable warrior could still die. The threads were disappearing at a noticeable rate. In the end, there were only a few hundred threads left. Seeing this, Lord Kun smiled lightly. Although his smile looked normal, the feeling it gave was exceptionally cold. Since you have been so kind to show me your beautiful show, let me return the favor. Lord Kun waved his hand and vines erupted from the floor around Ling Lan. The red buds on the vines bloomed instantly. In that instant, a gentle breeze blew past the main hall. The petals of the flower seemingly couldn't withstand the wind as they detached themselves to be carried on by the wind. The main hall suddenly dove into a world of red petals. It was eerily beautiful. 1,380 calculated their steps. Witnessing such a beautiful sight, Ling Lan's heart trembled. Although a scene like this would usually invoke a feeling of admiration and appreciation within someone, it only invoked a feeling of dread in Ling Lan. The more beautiful something was, the more dangerous it was. In the learning space, under the guidance of her instructors, Ling Lan had a deep understanding of this principle, whether it was the written meaning or the hidden meaning. The petals suddenly seemed to have given a burst of life, as they naturally changed their direction to fly towards Ling Lan ferociously. At the scene, Ling Lan instantly understood what Lord Kun meant when he said he would return the favor. Without a doubt, he was returning her with petals like how she did to him with ice needles. Ling Lan placed her hands together and a giant ice dome congregated around her. Boom! The razor-sharp petals exploded as soon as it hit the ice dome. A dense red mist soon began to spread around the hall from the exploded petals. The emergency alarm in Ling Lan's mind started blaring furiously. Without a second to waste, she quickly held in her breath. However, Ling Lan immediately realized something had gone terribly wrong. As the red mist was slowly infiltrating into her domain concept, it was corroding her domain concept. Right at this second, Little White's clone, who was fighting with the Crimson Bug, finally devoured its opponent. It burped in satisfaction. The meal it ate today was very nourishing for its body. After it finished the battle today and had a good sleep, it would be able to advance. Suddenly, Its body shuddered. It turned wild with joy as it looked at the thick red mist. It smelled something that was even more delicious. This red mist was definitely the tonics of tonics. Roar. Master, please let me eat it. Little White shouted agitatedly as the appearance of the red mist was a huge opportunity for it. If its master ate the red mist without sharing with it, it would cry itself to death. In Little White's eyes, anything that was good for it was good for its master too. Thus, in his mind, its master would like to eat anything that it liked to eat too. Fortunately, Ling Lan didn't know that Little White had this weird perception about her. If not, she would definitely give Little White some quality education to let it understand that there was a difference in the taste between humans and monsters like it. While Little White was being jealous of eating the good food by herself, Ling Lan was still thinking of ways to solve this danger that could erode her domain concept. Suddenly, she could hear Little White shouting with all its might. That's good too. Ling Lan decisively stopped using her ice element concept. Almost instantly, a slit appeared in front of Ling Lan. It slowly opened, revealing a deep and endless multi-dimensional space. It's really the space element. Lord Kun's expression turned serious. He carefully observed the multi-dimensional space that was opened. After the multi-dimensional space appeared, a huge suction force came out of it. All the red mist in the air got sucked into the multi-dimensional space. Little White was a pet that loyally protected its master. After the red mist was sucked into its belly, it noticed that Lord Kun still wanted to attack its master, so it got angry and it tried to bite Lord Kun. HMPH, Little White must be a qualified loyal pet that attacked without barking. Who instilled this thought into Little White? Please look for its razor, Li Lan. In Lord Kun's point of view, he could only see the multi-dimensional space extending and moving towards him. His gaze turned sharp. He waved his hands in an orderly manner and a patch of grass magically grew ground from the pulverized marble floor. Then, the grass grew out radically until it was like a giant wave of grass. With its immense momentum, it moved towards the multi-dimensional space with the intention to wrap itself around it. The giant grass wave covered the entire hole. Although the suction force coming from the hole was strong, the grass wave could still hold on as its ends were clinging on the edge of the hole, helping it to hold on with perseverance. No matter how much Little White sucked, it wouldn't go in. This stalemate was maintained for a few seconds. Little White soon realized it couldn't do anything to the grass wave, so it decided to stop. Snap! The multi-dimensional space closed up. The grass wave slowly fell to the ground without the suction force from the black hole. When it fell to the ground, everyone could see that only the edges of the grass wave were left. The center portion had already been sucked away. Little White felt a little full. The mass amount of energy was wreaking havoc in its body, so it must immediately enter its evolution state or the energy would go into an uncontrollable state. If that happened, it would get injured. Hence, it started roaring out loud a few times. Master, I'm full. I need to evolve, so I'll leave first. Before Ling Lan could reply, all of Little White's clones in the main hall withered away. Little White followed its withered clones and flowed down their roots, piercing through the marble floor to reach the soil below the Rainbow Palace to hide in the depths of the soil. Space element is indeed impressive. Take another attack from me. A cold intent appeared in Lord Kun's eyes. His hands danced around each other quickly, and soon the entire main hall was swarmed with plants. The extravagant and brightly lighted hall turned into a world of plants. Ling Lan could distinctively feel her opponent's domain concept pushing away and segregating her ice element domain from the main hall. This was clear evidence that her opponent's domain concept was more powerful than hers. Although they were both in the Imperial realm, there was a huge difference between her and Lord Kun. Killing intent suddenly appeared in Ling Lan's gaze, and a powerful force of presence descended on Lord Kun's head. Lord Kun was caught off his guard by the sudden change, so he vomited out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, this force of presence only lasted for a split second. Even so, Lord Kun felt cold sweat all over his body. Even his legs were a little weak. God realm. He stared at Ling Lan with dread before finally managing to squeeze these two words out. He didn't expect such a frightening existence to be present around Lan Zhao. Ling Lan placed her hand behind her back and said calmly, "The 13 Lords of the Lawless Lands is very powerful. If the Soul Society doesn't show some sincerity, how can we ask for a peaceful collaboration? In order to do business in this vicious land, you needed to have a powerful background. If not, you're not here to do business, you're here to give up your life." Soul Society really covered all their steps, Lord Kun said with a pale face. He was pale because having such a powerful person stationed here didn't mean anything good for the Lawless Lands. Plus, he was also quite injured from the altercation. "Thank you for the compliment. The Soul Emperor doesn't like to fail." Ling Lan smiled and said, "The promises of the Soul Society still remain effective." "Good. I'll tell Lord Qian about this." Lord Kun replied resolutely, "Tomorrow at 8 a.m., the news of a new Lord Kun will be announced." "This is a decision made by the 13 Lords of the Lawless Lands." Ling Lan nodded. "Thank you. The goods will be here 3 days later." "It's a promise then?" Lord Kun confirmed. "Yes." Ling Lan gave her promise again. After this affirmation, Lord Kun's figure disappeared from the main hall. The world of plants quickly subsided. In a blink of an eye, the main hall returned to its normal appearance. Only after a few minutes did Ling Lan feel that Lord Kun's aura had completely disappeared. PFFT. She finally spat out the blood that she had been withholding in her chest. 1381 Nothing. "He only took over my body for 1 second. But the backlash is already so severe." "Just how strong is Instructor Number 1? Ling Lan pressed against her chest and smiled bitterly. However, asking Instructor Number 1 to possess her body for a while was a part of her plan. Even though it would severely injure her, it was something that needed to be done. For her plan to conquer the Lawless Landed, she needed the strength to stand on level ground with them. Even if she didn't have it, she still needed to fake she had it. This should be enough to stall them for a while. Ling Lan endured the immense pain and walked to the ice throne to sit down. Then, she began to practice her qi exercises. Without the Nuwa agent, Ling Lan could only use her own restoration techniques. She was lucky that the qi exercises had always been good to her. Despite not being as strong as the Nuwa agent, it still showed some positive results. At the spaceport, where the Jialan ship was docked at, it was just as Ling Lan had expected. A few unknown factions attempted to steal the supplies on the Jialan ship. However, these people didn't think that they would be met with a brick wall. There were actually more than 10 titled Domain Realm formidable warriors guarding Jialan ship, and Domain Realm masters swarmed the ship. Of course, the thieves weren't weak either. Although they were caught off guard in the beginning, they quickly calmed themselves and pushed back those on the Jialan ship. Right as other factions were watching from the sidelines, deciding whether they should join or not, the Jialan ship finally revealed their fangs. No one expected the Jialan ship to have an ace mecha clan of 2,000 soldiers, and most of them were peak-level ace operators. It should be known that an elite ace operator with a top-class ace mecha could easily deal with a beginner Domain Realm master. A peak-level ace operator with a top-class ace mecha would be able to fight against titled Domain Realm formidable warriors. It was just like if the Jialan ship suddenly had 2,000 men who were just as strong as titled Domain Realm formidable warriors. Would any standard faction be able to fight against them? Unless it was a faction under the 13 Lords. However, the factions of the 13 Lords had made a pact with Ling Lan, so they definitely wouldn't take the risk of exposing themselves by sending their own ace mecha clans to join the battle. Those factions who saw the situation turn badly for them quickly retreated. Zhao Jun and the others remembered Ling Lan's orders and didn't chase them. They stood firmly and guarded Jialan ship without leaving its side. Li Shu, who had been busy saving the injured soldiers, finally treated the last patient. After some grueling hours of work, he finally stepped out of the medical operating room. Luo Zhao, who had been busy dealing with all kinds of administrative affairs, was currently lounging on a sofa in front of the operating room. She was leaning on the back of the sofa with her eyes closed. Her face showed that she was completely exhausted. As the commander of the starship, she was given the responsibility of commanding the battle. It was her first time taking on such a huge responsibility, so it really exhausted her. When Li Shi walked out of his operating room and saw this pitiful sight, he felt sad for Luo Zhao. He walked into his own room beside the operating room, took out a blanket and gently placed it over Luo Zhao. His gaze fell upon Luo Zhao's beautiful and elegant face. Despite Luo Zhao and Luo Lang's faces being almost identical, Li Shi could always differentiate between the two of them ever since the first time they met. Although everyone basically reached a consensus that even their smiles were completely identical, Li Shi never actually agreed with that. From his point of view, Luo Zhao and Luo Lang's smiles were completely different. Luo Zhao's smile had a hint of shyness to it, while Luo Lang's smile on the other hand was a blank sheet. If he were to say it nicely, it would be considered a pure smile. If he were to say it in a mean way, then it would be considered just Luo Lang being stupid. But all of this was just his own opinion. After all, Li Shi wasn't someone who would force people to agree with his subjective opinions. The differences he saw between the two of them were kept in his mind, never to be told to anyone. However, it was because of his unique perspective that made him pay more attention to Luo Zhao. In Lingshan, Luo Zhao had always been the person who everyone neglected. Her brother Luo Lang just shined too brightly in front of others. No matter if it was physical skills or mecha piloting, among the younger generations in Lingshan, not including Lingshan's boss Linglan who wasn't considered a human, he was definitely among the top 3. In addition, he was also the one of the brigade leaders. Luo Lang was definitely the person everyone had their eyes on in Lingshan. In contrast, his younger sister Luo Zhao, other than the friends she grew up with, along with a few older individuals who she was in good relations with, most would ignore Luo Zhao's growth because of the traditional and primitive thoughts about women. If she were to appear in front of everyone, she would either be mistaken for her brother Luo Lang, or be given the label of brigade leader's Luo's younger sister. It could be said that in Lingshan, even though she had become the department head of one of the departments in logistics, there were still people who believed she got to that position because she had such a good brother. Furthermore, they also brushed off her personal achievements just because she was boss's fiancé. No one truly acknowledged Luo Zhao's abilities. She was constantly being underestimated and wronged. Even her dumb older brother Luo Lang didn't notice. Boss Linglan, however, as the commander of an army, there were too many matters he needed to handle, which constrained his time to concern himself with his fiancé. Additionally, Luo Zhao had always been a strong-willed woman. Even if she had been wronged, she wouldn't speak out about it. She would only bite her lip and work hard to quickly grow, in order for everyone to acknowledge her sooner. It was like that when she followed Li Shi to learn medicine. There were many times, when he did checks at night, he saw her staying back in the operating room by herself. She used needles on her own body to study where the pressure points were precisely at. Only after experiencing the effect and pain that came along with it could one finally acquire this technique. Luo Zhao understood that, and did not go easy on herself. Li Shi acknowledged that in the past, he was more or less affected by the traditional way of thought. That was why when boss sent Luo Zhao and Hong Xuya to learn under him, he only taught them some basic first aid for emergency purposes. He didn't want to teach them too much. However, Luo Zhao's perseverance and her willingness to improve made him acknowledge her, and all her drive to improve was because of one person. Wasn't he the same when he first set out to be a military doctor? It all was to help that one person who he treasured the most. Li Shi understood Luo Zhao's thoughts because he was in her position before. After noticing her strong drive to improve, Li Shi began to patiently teach Luo Zhao all of his learned medical techniques. He was willing to teach whatever Luo Zhao wanted. After Lingshan became an army and Luo Zhao left to become a department head within the logistics department, Luo Zhao finally felt she could hold her head up high. Luo Zhao faced the suspicions against her, worked hard and slowly proved everyone wrong. Others might not have seen all of her hard work behind her glorious achievements, but he saw it clearly. He knew the path Luo Zhao took was not an easy one, but rather quite hard. Most importantly, no one helped her in this difficult path. Luo Leng had always been negligent and careless, so he wouldn't understand Luo Zhao's trouble unless told. Boss, on the other hand, Li Shi actually believed Boss clearly knew about Luo Zhao's troubles, but Boss never chose to do anything about it. He just watched from the sidelines. Sometimes, even Li Shi couldn't understand why Boss would be so heartless. After all, Luo Zhao was his fiancée, not just another subordinate. Why did he treat her that way? Even if he didn't help her, at least he should give her some words of comfort. Unfortunately, he never said anything to her. 1382 This was love. Li Shi saw everything. He felt his heart hurting for Luo Zhao. He interacted with Luo Zhao for a long time, so he knew she was working so hard for Boss Lan's sake. Luo Zhao didn't want to be left too far behind by Boss Lan. She wanted to catch up with him and stand beside him. This was probably what love was. Li Shi didn't really know anything about love, since he placed all his focus in his medical research, so he never really had the time to experience love before. However, after learning Luo Zhao's feelings towards Boss Lan, Li Shi felt that her actions could only be explained by love. Actually, Luo Zhao just wanted to catch up to her idol. Unfortunately, the man Luo Zhao loved wasn't someone who would prioritize his family. Boss Lan's heart was too big for just his family. He fitted too many people inside his heart, leaving the space for Luo Zhao almost negligible. Boss Lan was definitely a good boss and a good brother. Li Shi acknowledged Boss in those aspects wholeheartedly. However, looking from Luo Zhao's point of view, Boss Lan wasn't a qualified lover or fiancé. However, this was all Luo Zhao and Boss Lan's personal matter. While he was just a bystander, he didn't have any right to decide whether they were qualified to be together. Oh, he needed to talk about his little sister, Xuaya, too. This was their matter. Although he couldn't say anything about their relationship, he could still have his own opinion about it. In his opinion, Boss Lan was a bad lover and a bad fiancé. He felt pity for Luo Zhao, so maybe because of this feeling that he started to take notice of Luo Zhao. Unconsciously, he started doting Luo Zhao as though she was his blood-related little sister. He hoped that Boss Lan wouldn't let down such a good young lady. He didn't want to see his beloved little sister getting hurt or cry because of love. If that day really came, he hoped that he would be able to provide Luo Zhao with a sturdy shoulder to cry on. Thus, when he heard that Luo Zhao wanted to lead the Jialan ship to reinforce Boss Lan, so as someone who was worried that she would get hurt, he decisively moved his surgery room onto the Jialan ship. Of course, this was only a small part of the reason. Most importantly, he was worried about Boss Lan. When Boss Lan left, he didn't bring many bottles of medicinal agents with him. Li Shi was afraid that without him, based on how Boss Lan always disregarded his safety when he was fighting, Boss Lan would be severely injured. He was really afraid of this. Still, he didn't expect the first night at the Lawless Lands to be so dangerous. If the reinforcements didn't come in time, if there wasn't a Dr. Frankenstein like him stationed here, a lot of soldiers would have died. As the captain of the Jialan ship, Luo Zhao had a torturous night. Luckily, she managed to pull through it. Li Shi's gaze landed on Luo Zhao's furrowed brows. She was frowning even in her sleep. Ever since Boss disappeared during the battle with Twilight, Luo Zhao's brows had never relaxed. Li Shi was worried about Luo Zhao's state of mind. Impulsively, Li Shi raised his right hand and massaged Luo Zhao's brows lightly. He wanted to straighten the creases on her forehead. His little sister Luo Zhao was most beautiful when she was smiling. Suddenly, Luo Zhao opened her eyes with vigilance when she felt someone touching her forehead. Li Shi retracted his hand in shock. He looked at Luo Zhao, who opened her eyes, with a gaping mouth. He didn't know what to say suddenly. Brother Shu? Luo Zhao looked at Li Shi in surprise. She didn't understand why he looked so scared. Luo Zhao sat up, causing the blanket covering her body to slide down. Instinctively, she lowered her head and pulled it up. When she saw the blanket, she knew that Li Shi must be the one who placed it over her. She looked up and said gratefully, "Brother Shu, thank you for the blanket." Li Shi finally regained his senses. He said seriously, "Don't sleep like that in the future. The temperature here is a little low. It is easy to catch a cold here, especially when you're so tired." "I understand, Brother Shu. Luo Zhao replied obediently. She knew that Li Shi reprimanded her because he was concerned about her, so she accepted it readily. Luckily, you're all right. Li Shi suddenly turned to walk into his room. After some time, he came out carrying a leather suitcase. Brother Shu, where are you going? Luo Zhao asked sternly. They just fended off the thieves. It wasn't safe to go out now. I am going to see Boss Lan. Li Shi replied calmly. Why, didn't Boss say he would come and find us? Luo Zhao asked in confusion. Boss sent everyone out yesterday. Why do you think he did that? Li Shi asked Luo Zhao instead of replying to her. Luo Zhao started thinking seriously. After a moment, her pupils dilated in fear. Boss is fighting too? Do you think that they will only mess with us? Li Shi sneered. If they wanted to uproot us, they definitely would not let Boss go. Why didn't you say earlier? I'll call people over immediately. Luo Zhao jumped up and said agitatedly. This is not the right time for them to go over, Li Shi replied in a composed manner. Why? Luo Zhao didn't understand what Li Shi meant. Shouldn't they send help to Boss as soon as possible? Boss's fight isn't something people like us can take part in. He sent everyone here probably because he was afraid that his fight would implicate us. He is concerned about our safety. Li Shi's mind was as clear as day. As someone who was once an inheritor of the Li family, he had been groomed to become a family head ever since he was young. So his thought process was smooth and based on reason. If there wasn't already a better choice, the Li family would never bear to let Li Shi walk on the medical path. I'm just worried that Boss might be injured and that he doesn't have enough medical agents with him. If he doesn't get the agents in time, it may affect his health in the future. Li Shi explained why he wanted to leave now. The thieves came and left quickly, so there was a huge possibility that Boss won his fight. I understand. But I want to go too. Luo Zhao hurriedly caught up with him. If you leave, what will happen to the Jialan ship? Li Shi understood that Luo Zhao was worried about her fiancé, but as the captain of the Jialan ship, it wasn't right for her to leave. It's all right. My brother is here. Luo Zhao gave a naughty smile. Huh? Li Shi was puzzled. What did this have to do with Luo Lang? Luo Zhao pouted. HMPH. My brother always asks me to pretend to be him. This time, he can pretend to be me. Huh? This time, Li Shi was stunned. Let's go, Brother Shu. I've already told Jialan to inform my brother. Luo Zhao hooked Li Shi's arm and smiled at him sweetly. I see, you're Luo Lang now. Li Shi understood her intention now. Luo Zhao would return to the Rainbow Palace as Luo Lang. Fine. This could be a way for Luo Lang to compensate his little sister after years of not taking care of her and leaving her without a care in the world. Li Shi abandoned the poor Luo Lang decisively. Thus, Luo Lang, Jiming, Yu Shangfei, Tang Ninu, Mu Karen, Li Shu, and Han Xuya brought a portion of the servants from the Rainbow Palace back. Lord Zhen's guardians were with them, so their journey back to the Rainbow Palace was very peaceful. No insensible people came out to block them or create trouble for them. 1383 Reckless. When they returned to the Rainbow Palace, they went directly to the main hall. As they pushed open the door to the main hall, the sight of an apocalypse was revealed to them. However, there was no one in sight. Everyone's expression turned grave when they couldn't see Ling Lan. Under Jiming's lead, they rushed towards Ling Lan's room. Boss. Han Xuya was the most anxious out of everyone. She was so worried about Ling Lan's safety that she recklessly pushed the door open without asking and ran inside. Behind her, Luo Zhao stood there, looking helplessly at her hand. She wanted to grab Han Xuya, but she missed her by just an inch. HMPH. A cold snort was heard. Then, the familiar voice of Boss entered their ears. Come in. Hearing the calm voice, everyone finally felt relieved. They took a deep breath before stepping into the room. Once they entered the room, they saw Han Xuya being locked up in a huge ice cube 3 meters away from the main door. Only her head was not encased in ice. She looked at them pleadingly as she mouthed out the word help. She was obviously asking them to save her as soon as possible. She was probably afraid of angering Boss, so she didn't make any sound. Mu Ken smiled when he saw this. He walked over and patted the sturdy and huge ice cube. He said, We can't destroy this. You have to wait for boss. Han Xuai glared at Mu Ken when she saw him teasing her. She turned and looked pleadingly at Luo Zhao and Li Shu. She knew that only these two people could help her. Luo Zhao shook her head helplessly. She had no choice but to shout into the bedroom, "Boss, we're here." "Are you still resting? Wait for me for a moment." Ling Lan's cold reply came from the room. Li Shu frowned slightly. Boss's voice sounded a little weak. It looked like boss was seriously injured in his fight. However, there were some people here whom he wasn't sure whether they were his allies. Thus, Li Shu suppressed the worry in his heart. He would wait until there was no one around before treating boss. After some time, Ling Lan slowly walked out of the room with a red cloak over her shoulders. She glanced at the group of people indifferently. Luo Zhao blushed at the sight. She didn't expect boss to be so handsome when she wore a red cloak. The bright red color and the cold aura of boss were two extremes, but on Ling Lan, they seemed strangely harmonious. Mu Ken and Tang Nina felt confused when they saw Ling Lan. Was this still the pure and invisible little brother Xian in their memory? Of course. This wasn't the cold and oppressive Major General Ling they saw on Planet General either. The current Ling Lan was still cold, but he wasn't extremely cold like how she was in the army. She was more indifferent now. She gave off the feeling that she had forsaken the world, looking at the world coldly as a bystander. It felt as though nothing mattered to her. Her aura wasn't as domineering as before when no one dared to look at her in the eyes. However, her nonchalant glance was still too piercing for someone to look directly at her. "Sit." Ling Lan signaled for everyone to sit down and talk. Hearing Ling Lan talking, Luo Zhao regained her senses. She couldn't bear to see Han Xuai being punished, so Luo Zhao pleaded for her. "Boss, Xuai was reckless, but she was just worried about you and wanted to see you. Please forgive her." Ling Lan glanced at Han Xuai. Han Xuai looked like she knew what she did was wrong. Thus, Ling Lan flicked her finger and the ice cube around Han Xuai dispersed immediately. "Don't be so reckless in the future," Ling Lan said. Based on how natural Han Xuai pushed open her door, she probably did it many times in the military camp. It was alright if she just pushed her door or Luo Zhao's door, but if she pushed other men's door like this, wouldn't she suffer if she saw anything she shouldn't see? Fine. Ling Lan never thought that the men would be the ones that would suffer in that situation. If a situation like that happened, she would decisively stand on the lady's side. "I understand, boss." Han Xuai quickly raised her hand to show that she understood. Everyone sat down. Ling Lan looked at Ji Ming. "What happened yesterday?" Ji Ming quickly stood up and replied, "There were indeed many factions that got greedy. Many of those dirty thieves came." As he spoke, he looked at Luo Zhao and Li Shu before continuing. However, the Jialan ship had a mecha clan protecting it, so everything ended well. Even the people of the starship came to visit Lord Zhen. From the looks of it, Lord Zhen's position in the Soul Society wasn't as simple as he thought. "That's good." Ling Lan looked at Li Shu. Li Shu didn't need Ling Lan to open her mouth to know what she wanted to ask. He said, "There are some injured but no one died." Ling Lan nodded her head in satisfaction. This was just the start of her overall plan, so she didn't hope to see casualties so early. Although Ling Lan knew that they would be casualties in her pursuit to conquer the lawless lands, she still hoped to push it as far back as possible. Ji Ming remembered the mess they saw in the main hall. He couldn't suppress his curiosity, so he asked, "Lord Zhen, what happened in the main hall? Did someone attack the Rainbow Palace?" "Oh, that place." "Lord Kun and I got excited during our chat, so we decided to have a duel. I didn't notice the state of the main hall." Ling Lan replied dispassionately, "Since you asked, you'll be in charge of the maintenance of the main hall." "Yes, Lord Zhen," Ji Ming replied happily. To him, this was the first step Lord Zhen was taking in trusting him. "Go ahead." Ling Lan waved her hand. Ji Ming left the room and started getting busy with repairing the main hall. There were now only the people from Lingshan and the Flying Dragon Special Forces left in the room. Li Shi looked at Ling Lan and inquired whether these two people from the Flying Dragon Special Forces could be trusted. Ling Lan gave him a look to tell them that they were alright. Li Shi put down his worry and immediately rushed over to Ling Lan's side. He took out a small device and started inspecting Ling Lan with it. Luo Zhao and Han Xuya looked at Ling Lan worriedly as they noticed her pale face. "Boss, why didn't you take the Nuwa agent?" Li Shi was slightly furious. He detected that Ling Lan's old injury had flared up again because she fought before her old injury could recover. Hence, with the addition of this new injury seriously damaged her body. This kind of injury was the hardest to treat as it needed to be treated slowly. Once a mistake was made during the recovery process, there would be lasting implications. As a responsible military doctor, Li Shi hated this kind of patient. First, they were hard to treat, and second, they were irresponsible people who didn't take care of their bodies. "I finished it," Ling Lan said calmly. "You finished it?" Li Shi exclaimed in surprise. "Boss only left them for a few days and he already finished all the Nuwa agents he brought along with him? Those were life-saving agents. Did boss drink them for his 3 meals?" "Yeah, I almost died so I used all of them." The way Ling Lan talked about her close shave to death made it sound extremely casual. 1384 Identity of the Spy. Li Shi was shaken to his core. Just how severe was boss's injuries for him to use up that many Nuwa agents? Everyone was totally aware that boss was Heaven's child who could have anything he wanted in life. Their current situation was a perfect example of this, where boss easily took over the position of Lord Jun after coming to the lawless lands for only such a short amount of time. However, no one knew that him acquiring this position almost had cost him his life. After thinking about the struggles boss had encountered, Li Shi rejoiced that he made the decision to come. At least when boss goes to the front lines, he would be able to nurse boss's body when he returned back after a tough battle. While he was praising himself in his head, his hands didn't stop moving as he prepared 2 vials of Nuwa agents before handing them to Ling Lan. Ling Lan calmly took them off Li Shi's hands and drank them immediately. With Nuwa agent by her side, her recovery speed would increase by quite a lot. In a place that was fraught with danger, quickly recovering can ensure her own battle strength and safety. Ling Lan quickly absorbed most of the Nuwa agent's effects. The rest of the effects must be absorbed slowly. The amount of Nuwa agent Li Shi had given her was very precise. If there was any more, her body wouldn't be able to absorb it, which would be a waste. After all, this was not the Federation. Li Shi had the ability of creating the agent, but here he didn't have the materials to create any more. In a barren place like this, Nuwa agents were basically equivalent to another life, so they must not waste even a drop of it. Feeling her condition becoming much better, Ling Lan placed her attention on Tang Ninu and Mu Karen. Yesterday, when she was deflecting the suspicion on her from the 13 lords, she didn't have any time to speak to them in detail. Now, the danger had passed, so Ling Lan was in the mood to speak with them. "You probably already know roughly what I want to do. Tell me, are you planning on going back or staying?" asked Ling Lan in a straightforward manner. "You want to make use of this barren land?" Tang Nina asked with a disapproving expression. "Will that be of any use? You should return to the Federation with us instead. The position of General of the 23rd Division is waiting for you. Your future shouldn't be wasted in such a barren place." "What's the military headquarters answer for my father's death?" asked Ling Lan coldly. Tang Nina was silenced by Ling Lan's oddly piercing words. He didn't know how to respond. "Just say it." "Although I already know what they did, I still want to know how despicable they can be." Ling Lan pulled on her sleeves as her expression turned colder than normal. Looking at the sight before them, Tang Ninu and Mu Kan felt that the icy cold Major General Ling from the past had returned. Tang Ninu and Mu Kan looked at each other with vigilance. Then, in the end, Mu Kan bit his lip as he said, "Taking on the enemy without being given any orders to engage. Dealing with private matters over performing his duties. Great. Great, great." "Haha." Ling Lan laughed angrily. Her malevolent aura quickly exploded outwards. "Ugh. Tang Ninu and Mukan's chests felt as if a fist had ruthlessly struck them. A mouthful of blood instantly came out from their mouths. Luckily, Ling Lan only fully let go for a slight moment. Otherwise, the two of them wouldn't be just spitting out blood. On the other side, Li Shu, Han Xuya and Luo Zhao were not even one bit affected. Despite being overly angry, she didn't lose her rationality. Her force of presence was still controlled perfectly. It was only sent towards Mukan and Tang Ninu. Haha, that's the military headquarters for you. In the Twilight Empire, which one of the steps that my father took wasn't after careful planning and thought? If it wasn't for their devious scheme, why would he leave a winning battle to come and save me? Ling Lan laughed out maniacally. Even though it is all their fault, they not only push away all responsibility for their crimes, they even dirty the name of my father. Tell me, what can I do against a completely corrupt military headquarters? If I go back, I probably would become a puppet that they can toss back and forth. However, you can't resolve General Ling's grievances by being here, shouted Mukan. He didn't want Ling Lan to walk a crooked path. The stronger Ling Lan became, the more afraid he was that she would walk the wrong path. If that day were to come, it would be the end of the Federation. I can't now, but it doesn't mean I can't go back in the future. Ling Lan regained her composure and said in a calm expression. The anger she had festering in her body seemed to have disappeared. Tang Ninu and Mukan stared blankly after hearing those words. Mukan recovered quicker of the two. You want to take over the lawless lands? That's impossible. Only by becoming the king of the lawless lands would Ling Lan have the qualifications to negotiate with the Federation. Then, there would be hope for the military headquarters to give some leeway and right the wrong they did to Ling Zhao. Why would it be impossible? I'm already one of the 13 lords, asked Ling Lan. It's impossible. No matter if it's the Federation, Caesar or any other nations, they won't allow the lawless lands to have just one king, said Tang Ninu with certainty. As the next generation leader who was developed by the Flying Dragon Special Forces, the database Tang Ninu had access to was vast. For example, secrets regarding the lawless lands. I know. There's spies hidden in here from many nations. Once they discover danger, they would work with their home nation to create chaos and bloodshed. During the time on the lawless lands, Ling Lan had been reading through the documented events on the lawless lands. She had more or less discovered some patterns. Tang Ninu's mouth moved, but in the end, no words came out of his mouth. In his mind, the Federation wouldn't resort to doing that. I also know that some of these spies have risen quite high here, for example, being the guardians of the 13 lords. While Ling Lan was speaking, she was also focused on Tang Ninu's expression. Some may even have become one of the 13 lords. After those words were said, Tang Ninu's eyes twitched a little. Despite it being hard to detect, how could it escape from Ling Lan's sharp eyes? Seeing that, Ling Lan narrowed her eyes and smirked. It was just as she had expected. In the past few days, Ling Lan had been thinking about an issue. It was clear that Lord Qian and Lord Kun were strong, but why had he never thought about unifying the lawless lands? With the strength of the Lord Qian and Kun, it was definitely possible, unless Lord Qian wasn't in the God realm like the rumors said. However, all of the documented information showed that the possibility of Lord Qian had entered the God realm was highly likely. Lord Kun, who just fought with Ling Lan, was clearly halfway into the God realm. Someone who could be respected by someone who was halfway into the God realm, other than an actual God realm individual. There was no other exception. The fight with Lord Kun wasn't just to buy her more time. Ling Lan was also using that fight to determine Lord Qian's real strength. Both sides were probing each other. Perhaps Ling Lan fell into the trap of believing the fake facade the opponent had purposely created. However, Ling Lan had always been cautious. She would rather assume her opponents to be stronger than her than to think they were weaker. The only thing that could scare Lord Qian from unifying the lawless was definitely the person or people pulling the strings behind the 13 lords, or perhaps Lord Qian himself was also a spy. This prediction seemed absurd, but after careful thought, it was a possibility. 1,385 damage. It was highly likely the lawless lands being in a messy state was because of that possibility. A treaty of alliance between the 13 lords, but on the surface, they flooded each other's land, pillaging, killing, raiding, doing everything possible to make it seem that peace would be impossible between the 13 lords. And the reason for them doing so? They wasted countless lives of innocent citizens with terror just to create an image of an unstable land to throw off the surveillance being put on them by the other nations. So what if spies were embedded in their power structure? They had spent their entire youth, maybe even their entire life at the lawless lands. Ultimately, humans were slaves to their emotions, and as time passed by, emotions would change. When people obtained positions of power, they would be more susceptible to their selfish desires, abandoning what they had in the Federation just to fulfill their selfish desires here. All in all, people's intent would change over time. The 13 lords are very interesting. Ling Lance smiled. We have a lot of time. We can slowly dig deeper into them, and I'm sure there'll definitely be something. Tang Nina calmed down and took a deep breath. He said, Lieutenant General Ling, I hope that you can consider this carefully. You're one of the 13 lords now, but it won't affect the overall power structure of the entire lawless lands. Hence, the nations won't act when they receive the news. But, when they realize that you have the intention of unifying the lawless lands, they will definitely get rid of you at all costs. There is no question in that. We won't let them know my intention then. Ling Lance smiled at Tang Nina and Mukan ambiguously. Are you planning to tell them what I said to the Federation? Tang Nina pursed his lips tightly. The emotions in his gaze were complicated. He couldn't decide what he should do in that instant. After remaining quiet for some time, he finally replied, the order I received is to protect you. The spies have nothing to do with me. In the end, he still lost to his feelings for Pei Xian. He only interacted with Pei Xian for a short 1 month and met with his real identity a few times after that. By right, he shouldn't have such a deep emotional attachment to him. However, in the depths of his mind, the innocent smile and the eyes that trusted him fully would always appear in his mind whenever he tried to ignore him. Because of this feeling of guilt, he was unable to do anything harmful to the real identity of Pei Xian. Forget it. He should just pretend that he didn't know anything. He was supposed to watch over the Ling Lan, not the lawless lands. Why should he care? Also, if Ling Lan was able to hide the truth from the tight surveillance and unify the lawless lands, that was his ability to do that. Tang Nina decided to be a bystander. As for Mukaran, he wasn't as loyal to the Federation or to the Flying Dragon Special Forces as Tang Nina. Thus, he obviously wouldn't report Ling Lan to the Flying Dragon Special Forces. From the very beginning, he already decided to side with Ling Lan. Plus, a hacker like Ling Lan wouldn't let them have any opportunity to leak the news out. The two of them understood this point, so they chose not to do anything. They were already Ling Lan's guests, so they wouldn't be so stupid as to become his prisoner. Li Lan, who had stayed in the chaotic lands for 3 months, finally compiled all the supplies Ling Lan needed with the help of Ziak Niai. He yearned to go back to Ling Lan, so he left the port the same night and rushed all the way to the lawless lands. By the time he arrived at the lawless lands, he had already left Ling Lan for 5 months. The moment Li Lan reached the port of lawless lands, he called the manager of the port to look after the 3 transport ships. After he settled everything he needed to do, he rushed all the way back to the Rainbow Palace. This was the first time he left Ling Lan for so long. He missed Ling Lan so much that he almost went mad. 1 day apart feels like 3 autumns. Li Lan finally had a taste of what this felt like. He dashed straight to Ling Lan's room. He knew that if there wasn't any matter for him to deal with, Ling Lan would most probably be cultivating or resting in his room. Ling Lan. Li Lan pushed the door open and shouted happily, "Ah, Big Brother Li is back." A pleasant voice much like the gentle sounds of a wind chime floated over. Li Lan stopped in his tracks abruptly. The joy on his face disappeared instantly and his expression turned cold. But, the next second, a smile appeared on his face again. His aura turned gentle. "It's Luo Zhao." "Yes, It must be because the Jialan ship had arrived. He missed Ling Lan so much that he forgot all about the Jialan ship. They needed Luo Zhao to merge with Jialan in order for them to send the supplies within such a tight time limit. Why are you in boss's room? This was the matter Li Lan was most concerned about. Even if she was boss's fiancée, they should avoid arousing those rumors, right? Boss asked Xuya and I to move in together with him, Luo Zhao said shyly. Although they knew that boss was a lady, others didn't. Thus, when they moved in, everyone would definitely think that they were already boss's women. In actual fact, this was indeed the case. Luo Zhao's words made Li Lan's heart ache tremendously. His heart couldn't bear such torment. Si Khan. He wasn't able to say the word congratulations no matter how hard he gritted his teeth. Li Lan didn't say anything, but Luo Zhao understood what he wanted to say. Her face immediately turned hot. Fortunately, she still remembered the order Ling Lan gave her. She said hurriedly, "Boss asked you to meet him in the study." Although Ling Lan's decision would cause some misunderstanding, Luo Zhao and Han Xuya knew that this was boss's way of protecting them. There were too many powerful people in the Rainbow Palace. All of them were unruly and belonged to the previous Lord Zhen. They didn't dare to create any trouble now because they succumbed to boss's frightening strength, but that didn't mean that they might not do something stupid. For instance, they might challenge Ling Lan's subordinates to crack down Ling Lan's powerful image. The two ladies were on the weaker side, so they were easy targets for these people. When someone wasn't strong enough, their identity became even more important. Li Lan forced the heart-throbbing pain back into the recesses of his body when he heard this. He quickly turned around and dashed into Ling Lan's study. The moment he entered the room, he heard Ling Lan's indifferent voice. "You are back." Hearing the words, Li Lan felt warmth in his heart. Ling Lan's words seemed to have appeased the throbbing pain a little. "I didn't expect your two fiancés to come." Li Lan had already lost his cool. He didn't choose to report his work but instead insisted on finding the truth. Luo Zhao came, so it would be weird if Xuya didn't come. Ling Lan looked at Li Lan in surprise. With Li Lan's intelligence, he should be able to guess what had happened easily. "I thought that Qilong wouldn't bear to let her go." Li Lan couldn't control his desire to temper their relationship, so he acted decisively. Ling Lan was shocked. "What do you mean?" Li Lan rubbed his forehead in frustration. He seemed to regret what he said without thinking just now. "I knew Xuya likes Qilong." "Are you saying Qilong likes her too?" Ling Lan was happy. She didn't want her two younger sisters to really become her fake wives. If there were really people who liked them without fearing that they would offend her or get beaten to death by her, and she felt that the man was good too, she didn't mind letting her younger sisters go. Ling Lan had more expressions than normal, but the greater the fluctuations in her emotions, the colder her expression became. This made it harder for people to understand her true emotions. Hence, in Li Lan's eyes, Ling Lan looked angry. As expected, Ling Lan liked women. He liked his two fiancées. 1386. The result of hunger. At this realization, Li Lan was in despair. Did this mean that he doesn't have any hope at all? No, nothing is certain until the last moment. "I still have a chance. I must have." Li Lan's eyes were sparkling. Initially, he was planning on progressing their relationship slowly. He wanted to ingrain himself into Ling Lan's heart with baby steps. However, the arrival of Luo Zhao and Han Xuya lit a fire under his butt. He now understood he must take the initiative. If not, he would lose everything. "In the past, I unintentionally noticed that Qilong's gaze is a little special when he looks at Xuya. That's why I took notice of it." The moment Li Lan decided to take the initiative, he wouldn't be soft-hearted. "Qilong has been hiding it from me very well." Ling Lan controlled her urge to roll her eyes as she spoke calmly. It was no surprise that they were starting to look for love since they were now adults. She still remembered in the past when Han Xuya confessed to Qilong. That brat rejected her directly with the reason of wanting to focus on becoming stronger. "I think he's just afraid of offending you. After all, Xuya is your woman. Even if Qilong really likes her, he won't dare to say it." Li Lan pushed forward secretly again. You know that I was heavily injured at that time, so I had to accept Luo Zhao and Xuaya's care under those circumstances. My family rule is like this, so I must abide by it. But, if the two of them like each other, I can't heartlessly break them up, right? But, the brat's performance really disappoints me. He is really bad, Ling Lan said angrily. Was she so unreasonable in Qilong's eyes? Maybe the more you love someone, the harder it is to break the status quo. Plus, Qilong has respected you ever since he was young. He takes you as his elder brother. He might feel bad if he troubled you with his love struggles. Li Lan pretended to be speaking up for Qilong. I have to thank you for telling me this, Li Lan. Ling Lan felt thankful in her heart. She didn't believe that Li Lan had a slip of his tongue. He must have discovered something, so he used this chance to remind her. Ling Lan lifted her right hand and rubbed the middle of her eyebrows. In the future, she might have to worry about her younger sister's marriage to prevent some men from snatching them away when she wasn't paying attention. Although Qilong was a brother she groomed personally, in this case, she would stand on her younger sister's side. If anyone dared to bully her younger sisters, even if they were her brothers, she would beat them up. Li Lan saw this and hurried forward. He stood behind Ling Lan and helped her to massage her temples. Actually, there's no need to be angry. You should know that you're the dream lover of all the women in the Federation. If you want, there will be a line of women waiting to marry you. Li Lan comforted Ling Lan softly. He was afraid that the issue he said would make him Ling Lan unhappy. The Federation? Dream lover? Isn't that talking about my father? Ling Lan felt speechless. Everyone envied her, but to her, this was nothing to be happy about. That's the generation before us. 2 years ago, the military did a survey. The person that the ladies in our generation wanted to marry the most is you. Li Lan's heart was dripping blood. If he had a choice, he didn't want to say this. This meant that he had many potential love rivals, too many. What made him the most frustrated was that he still reminded Ling Lan about it voluntarily. Li Lan felt that in this relationship, all of his actions were getting dumber by the second. You mean that without Han Xuaya, there will still be many ladies waiting for me to pick? Ling Lan finally understood why Li Lan said this to her. She found it infuriating and funny at the same time. She felt touched too. Without a doubt, Li Lan was worried that Qilong and Han Xuaya's issue would hurt her, so he took great care to console her with those words. You said it. Li Lan pushed the blame away from him instantly. I'm not a stud, Ling Lan said with disdain. One wife is enough for me. Also, I don't have the heart to think about these now. This is what I've discovered during this period of time. Lan, take a look at it. Ling Lan quickly ended the useless conversation and took a file from her table. She passed it to Li Lan, who was behind her. Li Lan took the file and quickly read through it. About a minute later, he closed the file. What do you think? Ling Lan leaned back on her chair and turned her chair to face Li Lan. Li Lan placed the file back on the table and contemplated for a while before replying. The waters in the lawless lands are very deep. It's deeper than we expected. You see it too. The corners of Ling Lan's lips moved up slightly. That's because the information you chose is very useful. It's all very scattered, but once you put them together, you'll still be able to notice a link between them. Admiration flashed past Li Lan's eyes. The difficulty has increased, but this is an opportunity for us too. Ling Lan's eyes shone brightly. At first, she thought that she would need at least 8 to 10 years to complete her goal, but from the looks of it, if she planned her steps properly, she might be able to reach her goal faster. Li Lan said, diverting attention. Ling Lan said, substituting one for another. The two of them came up with their opinions simultaneously. When they heard each other's words, they exchanged a glance and smiled. Their plans were different, but they knew that the result was the same. Recently, the entire Rainbow Palace was very busy, from the top all the way to the bottom. Whether it was the authoritative figures of the Rainbow Palace, or the maids, all of them very extremely busy. During this time, the biggest change was the life of the maids. At the start, they always lowered their heads in fear, but now, they were able to look straight into anyone's eyes. Anyone, including the men under the other 13 lords or the authoritative figures in the Rainbow Palace, felt their hearts shaking if they laid their eyes on these maids. The maids were able to be so confident, yes, and it was all because they were the personal guards of Lord Gen's wives. That's right, those maids who didn't have any pride, the maids that could be bullied by anyone in the past, were gathered by the two wives of Lord Gen. Out of boredom, they gathered the maids to train them into their personal guards. The two wives even set a rule: the maids had to come to training every morning. All their work would be shifted to the afternoon. No one was supposed to disturb them during their training. What about those team leaders, managers, or guardians who didn't have anyone serving them? Nothing would happen. If they couldn't accept this, they could find Lord Gen for their maids. This was the oppressive reply the two wives gave them. Such actions undoubtedly ignited people's anger. So unsurprisingly, the infuriated group of guardians and managers went to look for Lord Gen to give them an answer. They looked for a long time and finally found their Lord Gen in the kitchen. When they saw him, they were all dumbstruck. The powerful Lord Gen in their memory was raising a kitchen knife and gesturing the knife at a fish on the chopping board. He seemed to be considering how he should cut the fist. He looked a little disheveled. When Lord Gen saw them, he asked calmly, "What's the matter?" When he found out what they were here for, he replied with a question. "Don't you have hands? So, you go make your own breakfast. Do you understand?" Lord Gen growled furiously at them. He looked like a malevolent devil coming from the depths of hell. No one dared to protest anymore. After everyone calmed down and analyzed the situation, they instantly understood that the malicious gaze from their Lord Gen was because he was too hungry. 1387 What to do? Ling Lan laid lazily on her soft couch. She felt like she received a new life. At the side, there were no leftovers on the plates. A pair of slender and beautiful hands were tidying the table carefully. "I didn't expect your cooking skills to be so good." Ling Lan was in a good mood. Her eyes were curved upwards like the beautiful crescent moon. This scene was entirely different from Ling Lan's usual cold and proper image. Somehow, it was still mesmerizing. At the rare sight, Li Lan's hands trembled slightly. The plates he was holding almost slid off his trembling hands. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. He exerted force on his fingers, managing to nip the plate between his fingers. Luckily, he didn't embarrass himself in front of Ling Lan. "In the past, I lived alone, so if I want to eat something, I have to figure it out myself," Li Lan replied calmly. He wouldn't tell Ling Lan that in order to win his heart over, he secretly learned many new techniques. Cooking skills was ranked the #1 technique you had to know when chasing someone, so he definitely learned it well. This was the kind of person Li Lan was. If he decided to do something, he would do it to perfection. His hard work finally paid off. Li Lan waited for a long time to show off his cooking skills, and the chance came. When he knew that Ling Lan was figuring out how to cook in the kitchen, Li Lan prepared an elaborate breakfast for him. However, he didn't send the food over directly. Instead, he waited until Ling Lan almost exploded in anger because of her hunger. Then, he would swoop in like an angel descending from heaven, gracing Ling Lan with food that could save her life. As expected, Ling Lan was extremely touched. Li Lan was indeed very scheming. He loved Ling Lan crazily, but when he should be composed, he remained calm and calculated how he could get the most out of this serving of breakfast. "You're really impressive. I tried to learn how to cook many times but I kept failing." Ling Lan looked at Li Lan in admiration. She had already realized that her talent in cooking was close to nil. She reckoned she inherited this gene from her mother. Luckily, her father's cooking skills were amazing. "You don't have to worry about such small matters. It's a waste of your effort." Li Lan smiled. "In the future, I can be in charge of your breakfast, lunch, and dinner." "That'd be great. Thank you as always, Lan." Ling Lan smiled in satisfaction. This would really solve her greatest difficulty. These past few days, she was really very hungry. Mind you, she had a huge appetite ever since she was young. If you stopped her from eating, she would really turn berserk. She didn't know how Wu Zhao and Hong Xuya came up with the idea to train the maids. Ling Lan couldn't help but recalled what happened a few days ago. "Boss, Luo Zhao and Han Xuya rushed into her study room excitedly. What the matter? Ling Lan put down the things she was doing and asked them with her raised head. We thought of what to do, Han Xuya shouted happily. For the past 3 months, they could only stay in Ling Lan's room. If they wanted to go out, they had to make ample preparations. Ling Lan had to send a few powerful guardians to protect them or send Zhao Jun or Luo Ling to do it. There were just too many dangers in the lawless lands. No one knew what would happen if they went out. Plus, Ling Lan was still reorganizing the various factions in Lord Zhen's territory. Where there was suppression, there would be resistance. At places where they couldn't see with their eyes, the battles never stopped. Ling Lan had to be careful. 1 or 2 days were easy to bear, but once they stayed here longer, Han Xuya and Luo Zhao got bored. Of course, they were people who were able to restrain themselves. They knew they shouldn't create trouble for boss at this time, so they didn't say anything to her. However, Ling Lan was always concerned about her 2 younger sisters, so she soon realized their boredom. Thus, she asked them to look for meaningful things to do in the Rainbow Palace. Her younger sisters were very obedient. They decided on the spot that they should go back and think about this carefully. They thought deeply for more than 10 days. They took so long that Ling Lan wanted to give them things to do. But the 2 of them finally found an answer. Ling Lan allowed them to think of a fun activity to do because she wanted to train them. She wanted them to learn how to quickly find their position in a new environment. This was how Ziyi was trained in the past. Fine, tell me what you have thought of. After all, you have thought for a really long time. Ling Lan put down the documents in her hands and teased them. Luo Zhao glanced at Han Xuya. Han Xuya opened her mouth and said, "Boss, we have been studying the ranking system of the lawless lands. This is a place where strength determines your status. Powerful people will have a better life. In an organization, they will be able to sit in high positions and enjoy more authority and benefit. Just like the nations in the central region, ladies are at the bottom of the social status. Their lives are probably worse than the ladies living in the central nations. In the lawless lands, the lowest beings, the maids, are women. Women can be sold and killed whenever people want. They are treated like animals." Luo Zhao's expression was sorrowful and furious. This place was a woman's hell. Unless they met a good husband, no one would have a good ending. The women that had better lives were the maids of the 13 lords. No wonder the women in the lawless lands turned crazy in order to be placed on the waiting list when the 13 lords choose their maids every year. Those parents who loved their daughter were willing to spend a huge sum of money to buy a waiting list position. Those without money would kill to get a position. But, in actual fact, the women in the lawless lands are not as weak as the people from the central regions. After Brother Shi's experiments, we realized that the special climate and environment of the lawless lands caused a rise in people's physical constitutions here. This doesn't just apply to men, it applies to women too. Luo Zhao continued speaking. "It looks like you really did your homework. You even bother our extremely busy military doctor." Ling Lan smiled mysteriously at Luo Zhao. Only she was able to ask Li Shi for a favor. If you asked who's the person who doted on Luo Zhao the most in Lingshan, it wasn't her. It wasn't Luo Zhao's blood-related brother, Luo Ling either. Instead, it was their military doctor, Li Shu. He had always loved her like his blood-related younger sister. I didn't. Brother Shu was already analyzing the special environment of the lawless lands. He knew that I needed it, so he gave me the result of his research. Luo Zhao replied hurriedly. She just went to find Brother Shu, and coincidentally, the thing he was researching on was what she needed. I'll believe whatever you say then. Ling Lan shrugged. What else could she do? This was her beloved younger sister. She couldn't expose her, right? Boss, Luo Zhao and Han Xuya said simultaneously. Fine, fine, fine. Ling Lan quickly raised her hands to surrender in front of the whining Luo Zhao and Han Xuya. Continue speaking. Her younger sister's whining skills were really powerful. Even though she was a woman, she couldn't handle it. Ling Lan really felt worried about the men who liked her younger sisters. 1388 Very shameless. We performed an examination on the physical constitutions of the maids in the palace. and we found out that most of them have physical constitutions that are as strong as the both of us, some even have better physiques than us. Hongzui's eyes lit up as she recounted their findings, as this finding made them exceptionally exhilarated. So, Ling Lan seemed to understand what they wanted to do, so, we decided to train these maids to let them understand that women can take charge of their own lives too, and that they are not inferior to anyone, not even to their male counterparts. Hongzui clenched his fist as she spoke excitedly. In the past, we were able to form an all-female combat team in Lingshan. Today, we will form an army of capable women that will strike fear into whoever hears of their name. Luo Zhao took a step forward as she puffed up her chest confidently. Her face was already red in excitement and her eyes were sparkling brightly as she envisioned the future of her successful army. Have you formulated a plan for your goal? Ling Lan thought for a moment and asked. We've already done it, boss. Please take a look at it. Hongzui quickly took out the proposal they prepared and passed it to Ling Lan. Looking at the nervous and anticipating faces of Hongzui and Luo Zhao, Ling Lan let out a wide smile like a proud mom would and said, "You really made ample preparations. You even have the proposal ready." Hongzui scratched her head and smiled foolishly in reply. Ling Lan carefully read through the carefully written and well thought out words and snickered a little. "It looks like you didn't just use my military doctor, you even brought in my strategist." Ling Lan smiled ambiguously at Luo Zhao and Hongzui again. "No. We did not. We really didn't." Lan just felt that our idea is very good but is lacking in some aspects, so he kindly offered us some pointers to improve on the plan. Hongzui wiped away the cold sweat off her forehead. In reality, they really did use boss's name to ask many of her loyal subordinates to help come up with this meticulous plan. It's fine. Anyways, the proposal is very detailed. The timeline is thoroughly planned out and segmented well too. If you can persist with this plan, you might really see some great results. Every aspect of the proposal was written clearly, and issues that might come up were already geared up with contingency plans to resolve them. If they followed the proposal, there would be no problem. But, even still, it was quite unexpected for Li Lan to help them with their proposal. What was even more surprising was that she could tell he had spent a significant amount of effort to write this proposal. Ling Lan knew Li Lan well enough to tell that he wasn't a person who would do tasks that were of no benefit to him unless she was the one who ordered him to. Without her direct order, Li Lan would reject anyone who required his expertise, even if he couldn't coldly reject the person entirely because of their relationship. He would just come up with some half-assed plans and be done with it. At that time, Ling Lan didn't actually understand why Li Lan would help Hongzui and Luo Zhao so much. Now, after satiating her hunger, it was as if a hemorrhage in her brain had been unblocked. Ideas of why Li Lan would help them surfaced in her mind until only one idea persisted. "Were you the one who gave Luo Zhao and Xue the idea to train the maids?" Ling Lan immediately sat up straight from the sofa, her eyes narrowed as she thought, "So this is the fellow who caused me to be hungry for so many days. Why did I even feel grateful towards him in the first place?" "Not really," Li Lan said with an innocent face. However, his innocent baby face didn't work on Ling Lan as she smiled coldly. "If it wasn't you who suggested the idea then, anyways, why would you be so kind as to help them write up an entire proposal in the first place?" "HMPH, are you trying to fool me? Don't you know I understand you the best?" "What a sneaky guy." "HNNG, it is a long story." Li Lan gently and meticulously wiped the coffee table as he replied calmly, "When I came back, I kept noticing them sighing every day. I can't bear to see them like this, so I asked them what happened." "So, you gave them this stupid idea?" Ling Lan asked in frustration. "No." Li Lan gave a wronged puppy-eyed look. "After hearing their concerns, I suggested Luo Zhao and Xue to return to the Jialan ship. After all, they are the captain and vice captain of the ship. They can go back and train their little soldiers to pass time. Luo Lang will also be able to come back. Plus, I think Luo Lang is more suited to stay here. But they can't go back now. The Jyalan ship was now kept under tight surveillance from all the factions in the lawless lands. Luckily, everyone thought that Luo Leng was the captain of the Jyalan ship, with him being a titled domain formidable warrior and having an ace mecha clan at his beck and call, were enough to deter any more from doing any shady business. If they revealed Luo Zhao and Hong Xuaya as the true captains of the ship, trouble would come right on their doorsteps the very next day. Ling Lan wasn't afraid of those direct confrontations, but she was very afraid of the secret schemes they could cook up to mess with the two ladies. So, even though it pained her seeing her sisters so sad, she had to keep Luo Zhao and Hong Xuaya in her room. I know, so I asked them to cultivate whenever they have the time to improve their personal strength. Only when they have the capability to protect themselves and the people around them can they be released. Li Lang smiled. He appeared as if he was really thinking for his younger sisters. Hadn't they been doing that for the past 3 months? Ling Lan glared at Li Lang angrily. What he said achieved nothing but confused her in a giant loop. In the end, wasn't he saying the same thing? Yes, I just said it would be more tolerable if there are people training with them. Li Lan shrugged. His expression was extremely innocent. I just said this sentence at the end. Haha, so you're saying Luo Zhao and Hong Xuaya were enlightened by your words and decided to train the maids? Ling Lan scoffed. Do you think I'm so easy to fool? Number, I might be able to fool anyone else, but I can't fool you, Ling Lan. Li Lan sighed. Aren't you the one who understands me the most? Ling Lan just looked at him coldly. Fine, I concede. I did say something else. Li Lan raised his hands to surrender. He felt bitter in his heart. How frustrating. Why can't I hide anything from him? Rabbit really understood him very well. He might be unable to escape from his grasp in his entire life. I told them I miss the Lingshan Independent Army. If we were there, they would be able to lead their army of females to challenge the other battle teams for some fun. They won't be so bored there. Li Lan finally told her the truth. I knew the root of the problem lies in you. Ling Lan felt strange that Hong Xuaya and Luo Zhao would suddenly have the idea of training the maids in the palace when they never thought about this for the past 3 months. Now, she found the culprit who foiled her breakfast and lunch in the past few days. But why did you suggest such a bad idea? Ling Lan felt speechless. The maids all went to train, leaving no one behind to cook until it was late afternoon. If Li Lan didn't help with her breakfast and lunch, she would have to resort to using her non-existent cooking skills. Ling Lan felt her heart clogging just thinking about it. I didn't expect you to agree. Li Lan pulled a long face. He looked as if he really did mention it casually. You've already written such a good proposal. How can I not agree to it? Ling Lan felt even more frustrated. If you didn't want it to happen, why would you write such a thorough proposal? She couldn't even find a reason to reject them. That's because you will be looking at it. Li Lan appeared even more innocent. If I didn't write it properly, you might think that my skills have decreased. I will feel very wronged if you really think that. Huh? Your skills are decreasing? I'll thank you if you stop being so good at shamelessly scheming against people. Ling Lan rolled her eyes at Li Lan with an annoyed expression. His words were too fake. He obviously created this mess, but he shamelessly denied it. Thank you for your compliment. Ling Lan was completely defeated by Li Lan's proud look when he complimented his shamelessness. 1389 reliable? Li Lan's smile broke a little when he noticed that Ling Lan's expression was still frosty. He conceded in the end. Fine, it's my fault. I'm willing to make up for my mistake. I'll take care of all your meals from now on. Is that alright? At least, you're smart when it comes to appeasing me. Ling Lan replied in satisfaction. If Li Lan didn't dare to admit his mistake, she would definitely drag him to the training room next door and teach him a good lesson. Her attitude must be too good recently. All of them were starting to rebel. Li Lan laughed softly when he heard this. He carried a pile of plates and chopsticks and left Ling Lan's room. The moment he stepped out of the door, Li Lan's smile curled up even higher. He appeared a little arrogant. His immaculate scheme allowed his plan of pursuit to finally go on full gear. First, He gave Hong Xuya and Luo Zhao some work to do so they didn't have to stay with Ling Lan all the time. Now, without them constantly reminding him that Ling Lan had two fiancées, he would be able to imprint himself deeper into Ling Lan's heart without interruption. He now had more time to spend with Ling Lan, with him being in charge of Ling Lan's 3 meals. Li Lan never thought of just making breakfast and lunch for Ling Lan. He was so greedy that he wanted to take care of her dinner too. He wanted Ling Lan to fall in love with his cooking. It would be the best if Ling Lan got addicted to his cooking. That way, Ling Lan wouldn't be able to leave him for his entire life. Since he had already decided to chase a husband that had a difficulty grade of SSS+, Li Lan knew that he had to use all kinds of methods while using a multi-pronged approach to break down the defenses in Ling Lan's heart. Li Lan never thought that he would fail. To win or die trying, he would either live a loving life with Ling Lan or die. Ling Lan didn't know that the strategist she trusted the most actually had such evil thoughts towards her. She didn't have much experience with romantic relationships, so she didn't notice the bad intentions behind Li Lan's current actions. After half a year of reorganization, Ling Lan finally took control of most of Lord Zhen's territory. She took care of all those people and factions that had evil underlying intentions. Of course, this kind of reorganization resulted in a series of bloodbaths. The people that acted were mostly Luo Lang, Zhao Jun, Tang Ninu, and Mu Karen. Their methods when executing these bloodbaths were merciless and vicious. Soon, their feared names started to spread across the lawless lands, and soon they were deemed as the 4 heavenly kings. No one knew the names of these executioners, so they were given titles that used their individual unique appearance to differentiate them. They were Pretty Heavenly King, Luo Lang; Violent Heavenly King, Zhao Jun; Cold Heavenly King, Tang Ninu; and Smiling Heavenly King, Mu Karen. All the leaders of the various factions in the lawless lands knew about the 4 heavenly kings. They were Lord Zhen's most trusted confidants. Although there were 10 guardians at the Rainbow Palace, they belonged to the previous Lord Zhen, so they obviously would need some time to win over the trust of the new Lord Zhen. The only guardian that the current Lord Zhen trusted more was Jiming. Even Yu Shangfei, who accepted the new Lord Zhen right at the start, lost to Jiming in terms of the trust given to them by Lord Zhen. Everyone thought that Yu Shangfei would be unwilling to accept this unfair treatment and would argue for his fair share of trust, but unexpectedly, Yu Shangfei voluntarily took a step back and listened to Jiming like a subordinate would. The other guardians of the Rainbow Palace were extremely astounded when they saw such a scene. It should be known that when they were still following the previous Lord Zhen, Yu Shangfei was the right-hand man while Jiming was more on the sidelines. They didn't know that the reason Yu Shangfei suppressed his unhappiness was because he didn't have any confidence to outperform Jiming, who told him to turn his coat on Ling Lan so early on. Although the new Lord Zhen had told him to redeem himself by good service and didn't really punish him, the initial wrong move caused him to lose Ling Lan's trust. If he wanted to turn the tides around, he needed to perform well in the future. During such a situation where his position was unstable, how would he dare to create any trouble? He had to tuck his tail between his legs and keep a low profile. The old and new of the Rainbow Palace had a harmonious relationship with each other. Surprisingly, they actually didn't engage in internal strife, and it was all because the new Lord Zhen didn't discriminate against the followers of the previous Lord Zhen. Although he didn't really trust them, he still allowed them to remain in their positions while building a few new powerful teams to let his close confidants be the leaders. When distributing miscellaneous missions, he still used the old guards. When he needed to strike hard and suppress those restless factions, he would use his confidants. Since the 4 heavenly kings were really young, everyone including the other 12 lords, were waiting to see them make a laughing stock out of themselves. They wanted to see Ling Lan failing and embarrassing himself. However, although these 4 young men were young, their strength were on par with titled domain realm formidable warriors like them. Not only did they complete the missions Ling Lan assigned to them, they also earned a feared name for themselves. The people that didn't take the new Lord Zhen to heart didn't dare to underestimate him anymore after seeing the performance of these 4 young men. But, In the lawless lands, peace was only temporary, and soon, Ling Lan and her men welcomed their first problem. Are you saying that the goods that we transported back this time were snatched by Lord Li's men? Ling Lan was shocked when she heard the emergency report by Ji Ming. Ji Ming nodded. Based on the timeline, it's time for a battle royale. Hearing the term, Ling Lan remembered the information she tidied up a few days ago. She raised her eyebrows and said, a scuffle every 3 months, a battle every 6 months, and battle royale every year? Yes, in the past few months, because of your new position, our people suppressed themselves very much. Hence, the scuffle didn't happen. Ji Ming replied. So, will it be a battle or battle royale? Ling Lan needed to ask clearly. There was a difference between a battle and battle royale. If she didn't know which one it was, she might make the wrong decision. Based on their movements, it should be a battle royale. However, you just succeeded the throne, so I don't know what the other lords are thinking. Ji Ming wasn't very clear on the procedures when it came to the matters of a new lord, since there had not been a change in the 13th lord since he came here. A battle is a fight with one party, while battle royale is an all-for-nothing brawl with everyone involved. Ling Lan knocked on the handle of the ice throne and quickly started thinking of a solution. Let's discuss our plans on the basis that it will be a battle royale. At this moment, a gentle voice suggested behind her. It was Li Lan who came in to send her lunch. Okay, let's do that. Ling Lan felt that this was the safer option. She nodded and said with a cold expression, Ji Ming, immediately bring 4 guardians and the battle teams under them to the battlefield at the borders. Let them enjoy a good fight with Lord Li's men. Yes, Lord Zhen, Ji Ming said excitedly. Without a doubt, this order meant that Lord Zhen trusted him completely. Lord Zhen gave him the right to command all the battle teams. Only a confidant could do this. Li Lan looked at Ji Ming's back as he left the palace happily. Then, he retracted his gaze and turned to look at Ling Lan. He asked, is he reliable? Li Lan left the lawless lands for a long time, so he didn't have a clear understanding of the old guards like Ji Ming and Yu Shangfei. Plus, Li Lan was also a very suspicious person. Besides Ling Lan, he would suspect anyone else, much less trust them. You can give him about 60% of your trust. That's enough, Ling Lan replied indifferently. This was Ling Lan. She never totally trusted anyone, she just knew how to put them to good use. 1390 Collaboration. I think the likelihood of it being a battle is slim. It is much more likely for them to start a battle royale. Ling Lan raised her chopsticks and ate a few mouthfuls of her lunch before she continued. Yes, if they really did wish to start a battle royale, they will look for you. During this period, Li Lan had formed his own secret intelligence team. It was in charge of gathering all kinds of information from the territories of the other lords. Ling Lan nodded and stopped talking. She focused on filling up her stomach. Li Lan sat at the side and looked quietly at Ling Lan. Whenever he looked at Ling Lan, he wondered how good it would be if he could just continue staring at him for his entire life. Suddenly, Ling Lan hastened the speed of her chopsticks and finished the last bit of food. The moment she put down her chopsticks, a man in a purple gown appeared before her. What has happened for Lord Zine to grace my palace with his presence? Ling Lan calmly took the towel that Li Lan passed over and wiped her hands slowly. Did Lord Li snatch your goods? Lord Zine smiled and asked. Yes, I want to know if this is a battle or the battle royale. Ling Lan raised her eyebrows. In order to create the impression that the lawless lands were in chaos, the 13 lords collaborated with each other to create many games that were built on top of numerous corpses and pools of blood. As long as they were able to achieve the results they wanted, they didn't care how many injuries or casualties were caused. When Ling Lan realized this, she felt pity for the lowest dregs of the lawless lands as their fates were being in the hands of these cruel lords. However, Now, she needed to be involved with those cruel lords. She really hated this feeling of helplessness. She felt contempt towards the 13 lords as well as those who feared the potential of the lawless lands. "You're indeed a smart person," the other lords were wondering if we should inform you, but Lord Keon and Lord Kun said that you would have known about it already, so we don't need to make the extra effort, Lord Zen lamented. "I'm just surprised. Since the 13 lords are already basically on the same side, why don't you just form an alliance and develop the lawless lands properly?" Ling Lan asked. Her clear and transparent eyes made Lord Zin unsure if Ling Lan was testing him or if she was really curious about it. He contemplated for a moment before answering slowly. "Humans are hard to predict. No one can know when they will be backstabbed if they form an alliance." "I see. None of you completely trust one another." Ling Lan nodded. Ling Lan's straightforward and direct answer stabbed right into Lord Zen's heart. "Could we still have a friendly conversation? Do you trust us?" Lord Zen refuted. Ling Lan pondered carefully before replying. "I really can't." Lord Zen felt frustrated by the reply again. This fellow wasn't even willing to pretend to be friendly. He was really bad. "Did you come because I am collaborating with you for this battle royale?" Ling Lan noticed that Lord Zen didn't have the interest to chat further, so she went straight to the point and asked for his purpose of his visit. "Clever. You understood everything without any explanations from me." Lord Zen gathered his composure. Maybe this youth was still young, so he hadn't learned how to be slick in his speech. He shouldn't make people feel so stifled when talking to him. "Who is our opponent?" Ling Lan asked curiously. She wanted to know how the 13 lords choose their enemies for a battle royale. "This time, Lord Li and Lord Demon are on the same side," Lord Zen replied. "This time?" Ling Lan immediately caught the main point. Lord Zen looked at Ling Lan meaningfully. During all their conversations, this youth was able to catch the main point of his sentence every time. This sharpness was rarely seen among the younger generations he knew. Lord Zen already didn't plan to hide, so he nodded and said, "We drew lots, and you chose me?" Ling Lan smiled ambiguously. It looked like the other 12 lords admitted her identity as Lord Jen on the surface, but deep down, they still discriminated against outsiders. They didn't even call her during such an event and just let her fate be decided by random lots. "Actually, as long as 6 lords have gathered, we can start drawing lots." Lord Zen explained why she wasn't invited. Ling Lan didn't know if he was speaking the truth or not. "Is it a 2 versus 2 battle royale?" The documents kept in the Rainbow Palace didn't explain the battle royale clearly. Thus, Ling Lan still had many questions regarding it. Since she had the chance to clarify her doubts now, she wouldn't miss it. She would ask everything she needed to ask. Not really. There would be 6 teams. Besides the team which had been decided right from the start to be our enemies, we can still form other relationships with the other teams, Lord Zen replied. "Form relationships? They can be your enemies or your friends, right?" Once again, Ling Lan detected the hidden meaning behind Lord Zen's words. Lord Zen was speechless. He was already so obscure with his words, but the other party was still able to accurately catch the important point. "I understand. How do you want to fight?" Ling Lan replied. "Together." Lord Zen gave a helpless look. If it wasn't for this, why did he come here? "I mean, are we splitting up to fight with one opponent each, or are we doing it together?" Ling Lan felt helpless too. In Lingshan, she didn't even need to talk. One look was enough for her comrades, whether it was Han Jijian or Li Lan. Even people like Qi Long, Zhao Jun, and Ziyi were able to understand her intention and made the necessary arrangements. She didn't need to go into so much detail. Of course it's together. Based on Lord Li's temper, he won't likely split up. Lord Zen understood the other lords very well. Lord Li had a fiery temper. He liked to gather together and attack his opponent with all his might. As for Lord Demon, she didn't like to make any decisions, so normally, she would listen to what her partner preferred. "Is Lord Li very bossy?" Ling Lan asked when she noticed that Lord Zen only mentioned Lord Li but said nothing about Lord Demon. "He's a little bossy, but that's because Lord Demon doesn't care about anything." Lord Zen smiled as he explained the reason. "Really?" Ling Lan was dumbfounded. She met Lord Demon before that time. The impression that Lord Demon gave her wasn't that of a person who was easy to talk to. However, Lord Zine had known Lord Demon for more than 10 years. He would have a much deeper understanding of her, so Ling Lan decided to listen to Lord Zine's opinion temporarily. As for whether Lord Demon was really like what Lord Zine said, Ling Lan felt that she had the time to assess it personally. Oh, right. Whether it's the battle or the battle royale, the 13 lords never show their faces. When Lord Zen was leaving, he reminded Ling Lan, they don't show their faces? Ling Lan frowned. She felt worried about letting her comrades go onto the battlefield alone without her overlooking them. After all, the men under the various lords, whether it was their techniques or their physical skills, were all much stronger than her comrades. Ling Lan, no one can be 100% certain of what will happen on the battlefield. You need to let go when you should. If not, they won't have the chance to grow up. Li Lan suddenly opened his mouth and said, "You're right." Ling Lan's gaze turned cold instantly. She wanted to protect the people she loved, but she never thought of pampering or spoiling them. Ask Luo Lang, Mu Karen, and Tang Nina to lead their teams for battle. Let Zhao Jun lead the elite mecha battle team and follow behind them. Ling Lan gave her first battle command coldly. Yes. Li Lan's expression turned stern too. He quickly changed into his subordinate mode and prepared to leave to inform his other comrades. Ling Lan abruptly stopped him and said, "Tell them that we don't do unfavorable trades." Li Lan smiled immediately. "I understand." As expected, Rabbit was still that cunning rabbit. He would never do anything that was unfavorable. Lord Li, you better take care of yourself. 1391 Resolve it myself. Hey, what's your name? Luo Lang, who arrived at the battlefield and was still looking at his surroundings curiously, heard a voice ringing by his ears. Luo Lang turned around and saw a young man clad in purple clothing, looking at him with a smile on his face. Luo Lang stared at him indifferently. He didn't answer and continued to look at his surroundings. That proud, huh? The young man had an amused look on his face. In the past, as long as he flirted with a girl, that girl would be pleasantly surprised and become shy. They wouldn't be as cold as this one in front of him. Tang Nina nudged Mu Ken lightly with his elbow. Looks like someone doesn't want to live anymore. Oh, indeed. Mu Ken smiled as his eyes looked over with interest. Should we intervene? Asked Tang Nina as he looked at Luo Lang's impatient expression after being bothered by the young man clad in purple. Mu Ken gestured to Tang Nina to look at Zhao Jun. Zhao Jun didn't even do anything, so why are you in a hurry to do something? In the Rainbow Palace, possibly because knowing their agenda for coming here was not simple, Luo Lang and Zhao Jun weren't on the best of terms with Tang Nina and Mu Karen. They wouldn't even talk to each other unless there was business to be taken care of. Mu Karen was originally not a compassionate person. If they didn't bother him, then he wouldn't bother them. The only person who could make him bow down was probably Ling Lan. In contrast, despite Tang Nina's cold appearance, in reality, as long as things were not done too over the top, Tang Nina wouldn't take it to heart. He was much more friendly than Mu Karen. Zhao Jun heard Mu Ken's words, turned around and replied, "It's fine." For this type of problem, Luo Lang is quite proficient in handling it. In Lingshan, the leaders always dealt with their own business. Others would rarely lend a helping hand unless one person actually requested for help. This was a way of showing their trust in their comrades. After being harassed for quite a while, Luo Lang's patience was completely depleted, and in that instant, Luo Lang made a move. Bam! That young man was instantly slammed to the ground. Drive Master. From afar, a group of men clad in purple pounced towards Luo Lang. HMPH. Luo Lang only snorted coldly, and those men were instantly sent flying into the air. They fell to the ground stacked on top of each other, moaning and groaning in pain. In that moment, there actually wasn't one person who could stand up. The commotion alerted the other people from Lord Zen's group. After seeing Luo Lang beating down on the young man clad in purple, their expressions instantly changed. "You're taking this too far. A purple-cloaked elder suddenly appeared in front of Luo Lang and spoke in a cold voice. I hate it when people bother me after I already refused to talk several times. Luo Lang replied without any fear in his voice. Who are you? Asked the purple-cloaked elder cautiously when he sensed Luo Lang's force of presence being not much weaker than his own. I work under Lord Zhen, said Luo Lang calmly as he stood up. The purple-cloaked elder gestured to his subordinates to get Drive Master away from Luo Lang. Luo Lang didn't stop them from doing so. He even stepped back to make it easier for them to take Drive Master away. Lord Zhen really has many amazing individuals working under him. I was just speaking to Guardian Ji about this matter. I didn't think that I would be able to see someone as strong as you this early on, said the purple-cloaked elder as he smiled. He used this opportunity to use Ji Ming's name to show that they held similar positions in each of their respective factions. However, his words didn't change Luo Lang's attitude towards him. He was still cold as ice. Thank you for your compliment. However, even though we are cooperating, you still have to give us an explanation as to why you attacked Drive Master with no reason at all. Luo Lang's expression of indifference made the elder become fraught with anger. The tone of his voice clearly turned somewhat passive-aggressive. 1392 sowing seeds. Explanation? Luo Lang raised his eyebrows and laughed his heart out. The ethereal sight brightened up the eyes of everyone who was lucky enough to see it. In their eyes, the entire world suddenly turned radiant and bright. Suddenly, Luo Lang flicked his right hand out of everyone's vision. Following that, a dazzling white gleam flashed by the eyes of the spectators. The purple-cloaked elder, who was the target of the dazzling white gleam, quickly backed up a few meters in one step. Suddenly, a purple cloth slowly drifted down to the ground. Looking at the cloth, it was obvious the source of the cloth was from the elder. At that moment, Luo Lang was already holding an unsheathed sword in his right hand, the sword that had cut the elder's sleeve. The purple-cloaked elder narrowed his eyes when he saw his sleeve on the ground. He slowly raised his head with a cold look in his eyes. The four heavenly kings. He was one of the enforcers working under Lord Zhen. Before he came here, Lord Zhen had already informed him to be wary of the four heavenly kings working under Lord Zhen. They and the guardians of the past Lord Zhen were familiar with each other and they all knew each other's bottom lines, so rarely would there be any quarrels. However, they had never met the new four heavenly kings. Although they had heard from their subordinates about their appearances, the images they had in their minds were still blurry. Not to mention knowing their temperaments or bottoms lines. Lord Zhen was telling them to be wary because he was afraid they might make a mistake and cause a scene with these four. After all, in this battle royale, they were allies. If there were any quarrels, it wouldn't be beneficial for either of them. They were quite cautious in the beginning. However, no matter how cautious they wouldn't know that among the four heavenly kings working under Lord Zhen, there would be someone who actually had the appearance of a young woman. It was even his dumb grandson who disturbed that person. One mistake could perhaps spiral into creating a rift between the two groups. Why was the purple-cloaked elder so sure of Luo Lang's identity? Individuals at their level could easily sense the strength of someone just from that one move. The purple-cloaked elder knew very well that this ethereal beauty standing before him wasn't any weaker than himself. Being a stranger who was no weaker than him, along with the fact that he was part of the four heavenly kings, the name Handsome Heavenly King floated into his mind clearly. How's that for an explanation? Asked Luo Lang as he smiled beautifully. The purple-cloaked elder's eyes twitched. That beautiful smile invoked the feeling of fear within him. It was clearly a pure smile, but he could sense danger. Much danger. I'm sorry, it's our fault. In the end, the purple-cloaked elder decided to concede to not blow up this misunderstanding. Plus, Lord Zhen had already told him to not mess with them. In reality, a big part of the reason why he was being so much like a doormat was because being around Handsome Heavenly King made him feel uneasy. If that's the case, then all is good. As he said that, Luo Lang's right hand shook slightly, and the sharp sword in his hand disappeared like smoke. A glint of fury flashed past the purple-cloaked elder's eyes. In the end, He chose to suppress his anger that was caused by Wolang's flippant behavior and turned around to leave. "It's fine. It is fine. There is still a lot of time for my revenge in the future. There is no need to be in a hurry." Wolang watched as the purple-cloaked elder left in a calm manner. Then, he calmly turned his head to the left. Just as he did that, a figure appeared beside him. "Zhao Jun, you offended him." Zhao Jun spoke of the obvious fact. "Why would that matter?" Wolang glanced at him indifferently. "Being totally not cute. In the past, you were never this temperamental." Zhao Jun shrugged. "In the past, did I even have the chance to show this side of me?" Wolang snorted coldly. "It was all handled by Ziyi." After saying that name, Wolang felt his heart ache. That was the truth. In the past, he would just focus on training while those annoying matters around him would be given to Ziyi to handle. After being saved by Boss in the military academy, it seemed that he wasn't put in any troublesome situation because of his looks. Even if there were, Ziyi would have resolved it for him before he could say a thing. Back then, he felt Ziyi was just being a good brother. He knew what he hated and helped him resolve it beforehand. Now that he thought about it, were those only just things a brother would do? Wolang felt his thoughts were in chaos. Ever since Ziyi said he liked him in his last moments, it turned Wolang's world upside down. Now whenever he thought back to how they spent time together in the past, the things he took for granted now felt as if there was something more to them. "Forget it. If I can't make heads or tails of it, then I just won't think about it." Wolang shook his head and tossed aside those messy thoughts. "I'll wait until Ziyi returns and clears up everything." Ever since he returned to the Lawless Lands, Boss had been hinting that there was a possibility that Ziyi might not have died. This possibility definitely brightened up Wolang's dark and gloomy mind, although Linglan also said after that it hadn't been confirmed yet. Wolang still completely trusted Linglan's words. He was sure that Ziyi was alive and would definitely come back to them. "You're right." Zhao Jun thought of the Ziyi, who was always around Wolang, and nodded in agreement. It was just that he never expected them to ever be so helpless in a situation, so much so that Ziyi had to sacrifice himself to turn the situation around. Luckily, Boss told them that Ziyi should be fine, otherwise, he would have wanted to return to the Federation, barge into the military headquarters and force them to give him an explanation. Zhao Jun wanted to say some more, but a sudden energy burst alerted him. He and Wolang looked at each other and vanished almost simultaneously. Similarly, Tang Ninu and Mu Ken followed suit. In the next second, the four of them stepped onto the front lines of the battlefield simultaneously. They stood in a fan-shaped formation behind Ji Ming and the other guardians. In front of them, 12 other people stood on the opposite side of them while staring at them with emotionless gazes. The 12 people were seemingly split into two groups of people, as two distinctly different colored uniforms were within the group. One group donned themselves in all black, while the other group wore some mildly blinding rainbow-colored uniforms. Knowing that the four of them weren't familiar with the Lawless Lands, Ji Ming quietly explained it to them. The group in all black were 6 out of the 12 magistrates working under Lord Li, while the blindingly colorful ones were 6 out of the 12 succubi working under Lord Demon. 6 succubi. After hearing those words, the four of them couldn't contain their raw expressions. Just think about it. 6 men, wearing such bright-colored clothing and calling themselves succubi. It indeed could make people shudder at the thought. Are they only sending these 12? Tang Ninu was still the best at controlling his wandering thoughts and was the first to ask Ji Ming about the battle. Who knows? Ji Ming shook his head. It's possible that it's just a smokescreen for their real plans, or it could be just the 12 of them. Actually, the problem isn't that. Look behind the 12 of them. Ji Ming pointed behind the colorful group of people. They saw many human-like figures standing motionless there. Despite it being far away from them, they were still able to see them clear. Those are mechas. Zhao Jun's eyes froze for a moment. With his calculation, he guessed that there were probably no less than 5,000 mechas. Yeah, you actually thought this battle royale would involve us? Said Ji Ming. It's still mostly based on the mecha battle. We are just here to supervise those mechas. At the same time, It will be convenient for us to resolve any issues with others. Only 5,000 mechas? The combined force of two lords only amounted to this much? For Zhao Jun, who had experienced many battles with each of them involving hundreds of thousands or millions of mechas, this wasn't anything worth his while. This is just to probe the power of each side. Jiming looked at Zhao Jun annoyedly. The rules only allow for 5,000 mechas to fight. If a real battle royale actually starts, how could there be only this little mechas? Plus, these 5,000 mechas are all chosen by the two lords and all elite operators. Their proficiency with mechas topped all of their peers. There are actually rules for how many mechas are allowed. Zhao Jun felt that this type of battle was just like playing a game. It didn't feel real at all. The rush of bloodshed and slaughter wasn't there for him. It is the promise made between the 13 lords, and it must be followed. Other than that, everything else is real, Jiming said calmly. When he first entered the Lawless Lands in the past, he also believed this was just a game or show. However, after experiencing countless battles and seeing countless people bleed and die, he realized that it was only considered a game for the 13 lords. However, for those working for them, each battle was fought with their lives on the line. No one knew who was going to return alive. After seemingly understanding the meaning behind Jiming's words, Zhao Jun, who was originally nonchalant, had a more serious look on his face. I just don't understand. If the 13 lords are in a harmonious relationship with each other, why do they need to start a battle royale every year and needlessly waste their subordinates' lives? Tang Ninu, who was listening from the side, asked as he frowned. He couldn't accept this way of governing. It was as though other than the 13 lords, everyone else were no different than ants. Jiming didn't answer. As a spy, he knew very well why that was the case. They were doing it to make a show for the other nations. However, whether these shows were for the benefit of the Lawless Lands or for something else, he didn't know. It's probably to sow seeds, Mu Ken thought for a moment and replied. Sowing seeds? Luo Lang looked towards Mu Ken with a perplexed look on his face. Although being cut off from the rest of the universe, basically stunting its growth, it still managed to ensure outsiders from taking over. Mu Ken spoke out what he was thinking. We're born into uncertainty and die in peace. These words, although don't fit the situation on the Lawless Lands, it still has merit to it. Without outside danger, people would devolve into something like cattle, causing people in the Lawless Lands to lose their savagery and terrifying battle potential. Aren't the nations in the center of the galaxy most afraid of the Lawless Lands' battle potential? Once they lose that, the Lawless Lands will lose everything. Without pressure from the outside, in order to maintain the battle strength, they could only start these needless battles between themselves. Mu Ken's words also enlightened Tang Ninu. Tang Ninu then followed up, through periodic battles, the battle strength of the people of the Lawless Lands could be preserved. It could also let them evolve and advance in the battlefield, eliminating the weak and preserving the stronger. Mu Ken and Tang Ninu's words shocked Luo Lang. Was that the truth behind it all? The 13 lords started many wars not only to put on a show for the nations in the center of the galaxy, they were also doing this to sharpen the fangs of the Lawless Lands. That explanation makes sense, Zhao Jun said plainly. Otherwise, there would be no way to explain it. But, in the end, aren't they just killing each other? Asked Luo Lang. Was that actually a good reason for these battles? Luo Lang, who always followed his own instincts, wasn't comfortable with the decision the 13 lords had made. Yeah, no matter how good the reason, it's still fighting and killing amongst themselves. Mu Ken's expression was somewhat ice-cold. When those in power make such decisions, they would usually do it without any remorse. 1393 uninvited Gs. While they were speaking, the mecha group on the opponent's side suddenly had someone roar at the top of their lungs. At the same time, the mecha group on their side also did the same in response. Jiming's eyes narrowed. The mecha battle has begun. As Jiming's word left his mouth, the mecha group behind them suddenly moved out. The opposing side also did the same. It began just like that? Luo Lang was stunned. He thought that the Guardians, Enforcers, Magistrates and devils would fight first and then the mecha battle would start. Then how do you want it go? Ji Ming said helplessly. A mecha battle with 10,000 mechas. We can't do anything in such a large-scale fight. They have their own way of battling. After all, I know. But don't wars require strategy? Staring just like this. Even Luo Lang, who didn't like to use his brain, felt this way of fighting was too crude. These are our best mecha operators. They don't need to show any strategy. They just need to show their power, explained Ji Ming. As for strategy, we leave that to the other mecha armies. Where are they? Tang Ninu looked around them. Other than their group, along with the mecha army that had already met up with their opponents, he didn't see anyone else. The battlefield for strategy isn't here. Ji Ming pointed towards a tall mountain towards their left. Behind that mountain, there is an extremely large field. Mecha armies from our side are all within that battlefield. What they need to do there is to survive for 3 days, which is quite a difficult goal. Luckily, it's Nameless who is leading the army. He's one of the 12 guardians. He reached this position not because of his physical skills, but because of his mecha piloting. He's the best at piloting among the 12 of us and has reached Imperial level. Imperial level? Can't he already fight on par with Imperial realm formidable warriors with some of the 13 lords? If he is that strong, why doesn't he just create his own organization? Mu Kan said in surprise. Why would such a strong person willingly stay under Lord Zhen's faction? It didn't make sense. You really think an Imperial operator could fight against an Imperial realm formidable warrior? Ji Ming laughed coldly. I watched with my own eyes an Imperial operator getting insta-killed against an Imperial realm formidable warrior. It's because of the mechas. Zhao Jun could guess the reason why. Correct. The mechas in the lawless lands are essentially crap. The true source of an Imperial operator's strength is their mecha. Without their mecha, they are just an empty husk. Plus, for an Imperial mecha to fight on par with an Imperial realm formidable warrior, they would need a top-class Imperial mecha. Fighting without one would just be a matter of how long can they hold for. Ji Ming sighed. The other 3 finally understood the meaning behind Ji Ming's earlier words. On an equal playing field, the two could indeed fight on par. However, in the lawless lands, it was impossible. This was why the 13 lords could sit calmly on their thrones. Even if a mecha operator was strong, without mechas to facilitate them, they still wouldn't be able to stand on the same level as the 13 lords. This explained why this nameless Imperial operator was among the 12 guardians of the Rainbow Palace. It wasn't because he didn't want to leave, but rather he didn't dare to leave, especially after having a new Lord Zhen. They still didn't know Ling Lan's real personality. None of them knew whether she was a merciless individual who would rather destroy them than to give them their freedom. While they were speaking, the mixture of magistrates and succubi finally couldn't wait anymore. Blind bitch G. Come out. A 40-year-old or so black-cloaked man with a cold expression on his face suddenly called out Ji Ming. Ji Ming immediately raised his head and instantly laughed. Oh hey, it's Black SHT. I previously said one of these days I will take your life, and I'm telling you now that that day has come. Come out and die. The black-cloaked man named Black Dirt had a huge grudge against Ji Ming. From the way they called each other nicknames, it showed that they were already unable to handle each other's presence. It was just that in the past, when the 13 lords were in good relations, they didn't have the chance to resolve this grudge. However, today, as enemies, they finally could start this life or death battle. Hey, I can say the same to you. Ji Ming's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward and reached the center area. Black Dirt flashed forward and appeared in front of Ji Ming. Their killing intent is very strong. Zhao Jun frowned. Are they really fighting to the death? Of course, they wouldn't stop until one side dies. Yu Shangfei, who had been silent for the entire time, began explaining it for them. I always thought the numbers of guardians, enforcers, magistrates, succubi and others are always set in stone. They would fight and at one point, they would stop. After all, you all are considered the most trusted subordinates of the lords. They wouldn't let you die easily. Luo Lang was surprised. Indeed, the amount of guardians doesn't change. If someone dies, there would just be someone new to replace them. There are so many capable and strong people below us who are all wishing that we would die sooner, said Yu Shangfei. This was the real situation with working under the 13 lords. No one knew when they would die in the battlefield. Even the 12 guardians couldn't escape an outcome like that. Luoling and the others could feel the mercilessness of the lawless lands from Yu Shangfei's words. If these people were in the central galaxy, with their capabilities, even if they couldn't become leaders of an organization, they would still become esteemed guests of such organizations. They would enjoy the privileges of the elites. Even if they were unlucky, they would still be able to live peacefully somewhere until they grow old. However, in the lawless lands, these people didn't know how many tomorrows they had. Perhaps today was their last day in this world. Although Luoling and the others wanted to get more information about the lawless lands, their opponents didn't allow them to, as they invited them to fight to the death. They would fight until they could no longer fight. Of course, if someone was so weak, then they deserved to die. At that moment, in the Li Fire Palace thousands of miles away, an uninvited guest appeared. This uninvited guest entered without being asked to go in. Lord Li, who was lying on his bed with his eyes closed while enjoying the service of his female servants, suddenly opened his eyes. He looked towards the empty hall and said coldly, "Since you are here, then why don't you show yourself?" After those words were said, a silhouette slowly condensed out of the air. He wore a bright red cloak around him, but had a cold aura around him. The two extremes were actually oddly a good blend. When paired with that face, which was the epitome of human beauty, even rarely seen in books, it made Lord Li feel that the colors of the world solely existed for that one person. 1394 Naive. Lord Li stood up from his seat with wary eyes. Lord Zhen. He had never seen the new Lord Zhen before, but Lord Li was certain that this unfamiliar guest was Lord Zhen. "Lord Li, I've heard much about you," Ling Lan said indifferently. "Why did Lord Zhen come to visit me?" Lord Li signaled for the maids beside him to leave. Then, he continued, "We are enemies now. Isn't it a little rash of you to come without any warning?" "That is precisely the reason why I am here." A majestic ice throne slowly condensed behind Ling Lan. She flicked back her gown and sat down cross-legged on the throne, giving off the impression that she was the owner of this palace. Her sudden movement did shock Lord Li a little, but after he realized what she was implying by her actions, he felt a little infuriated and humiliated. He really abhorred those who didn't have manners. Once the battle royale starts, the result will be decided on the battlefield. Even if you come and find me now, I can't do anything. Lord Li suppressed the anger in his heart and spoke with an unfriendly tone. If he had a choice, he wanted to kick this impolite brat out of his palace. "I have no interest in this matter," Ling Lan replied coldly. "I came because I want to ask you when you're planning to return my goods to me." Lord Li was stunned. In a blink of an eye, he laughed loudly. "Ha ha ha, Lan Zhao, don't you know that once the battle royale starts, everything you take becomes your spoils of war?" "I honestly didn't know that," Ling Lan answered calmly. "Now that you know, you can leave." "Pardon me for not sending you out." Lord Li stood up and waved his sleeve nonchalantly. "There's no need to hurry." Ling Lan completely ignored Lord Li. "What else do you want?" Lord Li replied furiously, "I've already made myself clear. Plus, I don't welcome you here. Didn't you say that once the battle starts, everything you take is your spoils of war?" Ling Lan smiled. Her smile caused the entire palace to lit up. "I'm sure you have pretty good stuff locked up here." Lord Li was in a daze. He didn't expect such a cold and unfriendly person to be so mesmerizing when he smiled. Fortunately, he liked women. If not, he might not be able to control himself. Even so, Lord Li was still affected by the smile, slowing him down by a beat. After calming down, he finally realized that Lord Zhen wanted to rob him. At this realization, Lord Li exploded in anger. He curbed himself to the best of his ability because he didn't want to fight with the other party. Every single move made by an Imperial Realm formidable warrior was lethal and terrifying. If two such individuals fought, carnage and destruction would follow. While he was furious out of his mind, He was still confused. He and Lan Zhao weren't life or death enemies. Nothing could be gained if they beat each other up. Plus, as someone who had been one of the 13 lords for a long time, Lord Li treasured his life. How could he take the risk of dying? However, even though he feared the possibility of death, he couldn't possibly let Lan Zhao step all over him like that. When need be, he would fight to the tooth and nail. Ha ha ha. You are pretty confident, huh? Lord Li looked up at the sky and laughed heartily. Suddenly, he lowered his head to equal that of Ling Lan as he glared at Ling Lan sinisterly with a vicious gaze. Don't think that just because you killed the previous Lord Zhen, you are able to do whatever you want in the lawless lands. Ling Lan softly yawned as her eyes stared into Lord Li nonchalantly. There weren't any fluctuations in her emotions when she heard what Lord Li said. It felt as though everything Lord Li said was bullshit. 1395. You read Dreaming. The atmosphere between Lord Li and Ling Lan turned viscous. It seemed a huge fight was imminent. Suddenly, both of them jumped up from their thrones simultaneously. A long whip appeared in both of their right hands and they slashed the whip at each other viciously. One red and one blue. Two long whips with two different colors cracked at each other forcefully in midair. Smack! A loud ear-piercing sound was let out. Sparks of two different colors could be seen as the whips slashed along each other. Seeing that their initial attack was a failure, the owners of the two whips flew back and landed on the ground. Ling Lan twisted her waist and her neck to let out some tension in her body. She flicked her right wrist and the blue whip cracked in the air once again, rushing towards Lord Li ferociously. Seeing the vicious whip, Lord Li just snorted in derision. He shook his wrist and his red long whip welcomed the blue whip. Smack! This time, an even higher pitch sound pierced their eardrums, and more sparks filled up their vision. Ling Lan stretched her right hand out and caught the long whip that bounced back right in her hand. Then, she did a spin, spinning her red robe as well. She did this spin to counteract the force coming back from the whip. Lord Li grabbed a hold of his whip too, but he chose to take 2 steps back to eliminate the force. Ling Lan stabilized her body and looked at Lord Li in a composed manner. She said, "Maybe that can make you change your mind." A red light flashed past Lord Li's face. His gaze turned sharp and killing intent exploded from his body. In the face of the overwhelming killing intent, Ling Lan's expression still remained indifferent. She already had facial paralysis for more than 20 years of her life. If Lord Li was planning to affect her with that little amount of killing intent, well, it would be quite difficult. Lord Li frowned when he saw Ling Lan's ever unchanged expression and gaze. The next second, the killing intent disappeared. "You want to continue this farce?" Lord Li asked coldly. "That'll depend on your decision. If you want to fight." Ling Lan's gaze turned sharp and icy. "I'll fight." She spoke firmly without any hesitation. Fighting spirit exuded from her body in an instant. This showed her resolution. A disheveled look appeared on Lord Li's face for a split second. He didn't expect that Lan Zhao would disregard his own life and take such a huge risk just to get his goods back. How unlucky, Lord Li cursed. He had no choice but to soften his attitude. "What do you want?" "What you stole from me," Ling Lan said slowly. When he heard this, Lord Li felt that he could still accept it. Just as he was about to agree, he heard the rest of Ling Lan's sentence. "But 5 times more." "You're dreaming!" Lord Li shouted angrily. "If you don't agree, I don't mind." "I really do want to know how strong Lord Li of the 13 Lords is." Ling Lan lifted her left hand and an ice-drenched knife slowly formed in the air. Ling Lan wrapped her fingers around the icy handle. As for the blue long whip in her right hand, the flowing water started condensing before turning into a transparent tangdao with a cold aura. The chilling sword caused Lord Li's face to twitch. He clenched the fire elemental whip in his hand. Should he fight or not? There were only 2 paths in front of Lord Li. If he didn't fight, he needed to give the other party 5 times the goods he snatched. This young and hot-blooded brat would definitely not give in if he didn't satisfy his criteria. If he chose to fight, there was a possibility of death. No one could know what the end result of an Imperial Realm battle could be. 2 times. Lord Li gritted his teeth. He decided to take a step back, but he would never agree to repay 5 times the amount. Ling Lan looked at him indifferently. Obviously, She wasn't satisfied with the number Lord Lee gave, 1,396. I am not a BTCH, 3 times. Don't get too carried away with yourself, Lord Lee said with a furious expression. If Lord Jen still wasn't satisfied with this, he would fight even if he didn't want to. In reality, the amount of goods Ling Lan brought back was really huge. If he was really going to pay 5 times more, he would probably die of heartache. As such, he would never agree to her radical request. Fine. Since we're both members of the 13 Lords, I'll give you some leeway. Looking at Lord Lee's heartbroken expression, Ling Lan knew that she was close to his bottom line. This was the only reason why she agreed to settle for 3 times the amount. Actually, Ling Lan didn't care how much compensation he gave. After all, there were 2 huge powers behind her helping her to gather her supplies. The only issue on her hand was time. The reason why she wanted 5 times the amount of compensation was to make an example out of Lord Lee. If she didn't punish Lord Lee for what he did, the other lords might think of her like a doormat who they could steal off of with no repercussions. Even if she really did tolerate Lord Lee's actions, the same thing would happen a second time, a third time, and multiple times in the future if she didn't nip the problem off the bud immediately. Plus, as a person of her caliber, she could never allow this to happen, as this would undermine her legitimacy as a representative of the Soul Society. Another reason was that ever since she was young, Ling Lan had always been the bully, and in the lawless lands, this wouldn't change. Her image mustn't fall. When the battle royale ends, please pay me what you owe. After resolving the issue, Ling Lan gently opened her hands, letting the Tang Dao and the tri-edged wrench knife fall to the floor before dissipating them into a ball of cold mist. Don't worry, I will not forget my promise. Lord Lee squinted. The fire whip in his hand also disappeared. However, my promise won't stand if you lose the battle royale. The battlefield will decide everything. If you lose, you will concede your invaded territories and have to cough up everything you snatched. Lord Lee said coldly. Lord Jen, don't go against this rule. Ling Lan raised her eyebrows. The battlefield will resolve itself. It has nothing to do with me. Then, why did you still ask me for compensation? Lord Lee asked angrily. This was his rightful gains from the battle royale. Why was this fella shameless enough to ask for it back? Ling Lan tidied her gown and looked up. She sneered. Because I'm not a BTCH. After she finished speaking, her body slowly merged with the background and disappeared. Only Lord Lee was left in the palace. Lord Lee stood still for a moment. Then, he went back to his bedroom to lay on his bed. He crawled onto his bed, placed her hands above his stomach and shut his eyes. More than 10 seconds later, Lord Lee suddenly snorted and laughed. That fellow is really not afraid of anything. He actually became an example to warn the other lords. This fact infuriated Lord Lee. However, there was nothing he could do, unless he was willing to risk his life just like the other party and accept the battle. But he was too old to take such risk anymore. Plus, life just became more valuable the more you lived it. He really didn't want to risk his life just over some stolen goods unless there was no other choice. Let's wait and see. Let me see if you can still be so arrogant after the battle royale ends, Lord Lee thought to himself furiously. On the other side, Zhao Jun brought his mecha clan and entered the Komoda district. This was the section the 13 lords segregated for mecha battles. This area amounted to 50 acres, making the surface area as wide as the main territory of a lord. This piece of land would be given to the lord that won the battle royale last year. Lord Jen lost terribly last year, so he didn't have the home ground advantage. He could only attack from the outside. Fortunately, the Komoda district was very big. They could attack the district from all directions. Even if the owner of this land wanted to ambush them, he couldn't do it unless he had reliable information regarding their offensive plans. However, the lord who lost would be guarding against this leak of information too. To counteract this problem, he would give the leader of the mecha clan the luxury of choosing where to attack from several preset options. This act stopped any chances of them getting exposed and being ambushed, and as battle royals got more figured out, no one had the interest to do such an arduous and fruitless job anymore. 1397 Bloodpath. This time, honestly speaking, Zhao Jun's mecha clan only had about 2,000 people. Among the tens of thousands of mecha operators on the battlefield, his mecha clan didn't seem significant at all. Hence, when the mecha clan Zhao Jun led disappeared secretly from the waiting zone of the battle royale, no one noticed their disappearance, including Lord Zen's subordinates who were supposed to be in the same group as them. Maybe Lord Zen's subordinates just ignored them because they didn't think Zhao Jun's 2,000 mechas could affect the results of the battle royale. The Komoda district consists of a bunch of various environments, simulating various environments an army might encounter which they should get used to, making it a perfect battlefield to train the people of the lawless lands. The area consisted of flatland, highlands, deserts, grasslands, a jungle, an endless swamp, a lake thousands of square kilometers wide, and, of course, a continuous stretch of mountains. With the known fact that fights frequent the area, the citizens of the lawless lands never really settle in the area. Only people who were driven into a corner and with no place to go back to would take the risk and live here, hoping for a slim chance of survival. Regiment Commander, there's a mecha clan in front of us with more than 10,000 mechas. The leader of the scout team reported his newest findings. Zhao Jun asked, "Do you know who they belong to?" "We saw the symbol on their chest. It's a lightning bolt. They should be under Lord Zen." Soon, the team leader sent the video clip they recorded to Zhao Jun. "Ignore them, we'll go around them," Zhao Jun ordered calmly. "Yes, Regiment Commander." The leader of the scout team ordered his men to change their scouting areas. After some time, they met another group of people, but this time, they met their own people. The mechas they met had a symbol of a 7-colored scorpion on their chest. It was a 10,000 mecha squad under Lord Zen. Zhao Jun still chose to evade them. He didn't choose to gather with the main army. Zhao Jun knew that although the addition of their 2,000 mechas would increase the combat potential of that mecha squad, who would be the one in command? If the other person's commanding ability was on par with boss, fine. Let's not make things difficult for the other party. If the person's commanding ability was on par with him, he didn't mind listening to them. However, from the video clips taken by the scout team, it was obvious that the commander didn't know what tactics were. His mecha squad was flying above a piece of flat land extremely obviously. To Zhao Jun, they were basically calling to be targets. Even if they wanted to commit suicide, they shouldn't do it so obviously. Of course, Zhao Jun wouldn't be a busybody and remind the other commander kindly. Maybe his kind reminder might be viewed as a provocation instead. If the situation wasn't handled carefully, disputes could happen easily. After all, he was the new Lord Zen's men. The new and old guards already had a grudge, and he didn't want to magnify it. Actually, Zhao Jun didn't understand why boss didn't take bold and drastic measures to reorganize the confidants left behind by the previous Lord Zen, but instead, left them alone. To prevent them from being discontented, he didn't interfere with them at all. The new guards only formed a new clique by themselves, separating themselves entirely from the old Lord Zen's clique. They were like two parallel lines, no one would meddle with each other. Based on boss's usual brutal and cold-hearted methods, he would definitely create a huge bloodbath in order to be able to control the entire Lord Zen's territory. Zhao Jun was already eagerly waiting to fight with boss. But, unexpectedly, boss's attitude towards them changed 180 degrees, turning into a gentle lord before them. If he didn't understand boss well, he would have suspected if the ruthless version of boss was an illusion from his nightmare. But, his puzzled mind was soon resolved when Li Lan came to pass him boss's order before they left. Based on this order, Zhao Jun knew that the cold and vicious boss was still there. He just hid his intentions well, only revealing his fangs when it was the right time. Zhao Jun appeared rash and impatient, but he was actually an extremely calm and calculating person. Just like what Li Lan said, Zhao Jun was the best at protecting himself. If his interest wasn't affected, he would choose to be a bystander. You could say that he was cold-blooded. It was this trait that allowed him to have a good relationship with all the brigade leaders. Now, they were all regiment commanders, of Lingshan. Even Li Yingji, who didn't have a good reputation, had a good relationship with him. Thus, even though he knew that this mecha clan might suffer heavy losses when they would eventually get ambushed, he still ordered his mecha clan to move away from them as far as possible. He wasn't interested in becoming a life savior, especially when he still had to carry out the important mission boss gave him. He mustn't make such a dumb mistake at this critical juncture. The 2,000 mecha operators slowly moved away from the flatlands and entered the jungle zone. Most wouldn't choose to enter this zone, as everyone was well aware that a jungle with a lot of trees was the easiest place to lay an ambush. If you entered recklessly, you were looking for death. However, to Zhao Jun's mecha clan, the jungle wasn't really dangerous to them. They only needed to have good mecha piloting skills to maintain their speed as they passed through the forest. That was because to increase their chances of success, Qilong sent over the most powerful batch of modified mechas. All the specs of these mechas had reached the fundamental requirements for Imperial mechas. Moreover, they were all equipped with the Chameleon system. They were able to get the Chameleon system all thanks to Boss. When he was still the commander of Lingshan, he forced the chief of staff, He Xueyang, to give him these systems. It was said after that, He Xueyang ran to find General Ling Zhao because he wanted to retire from his position. But, in the end, he got persuaded to stay by General Ling Zhao. As for how General Ling Zhao persuaded him, this had always been one of the secrets of the 23rd Division. Interested parties could search for the answer themselves. The moment the mecha team entered Komoda, they activated their chameleon system and maintained a steady speed which suppressed the noises of their mechas. Regiment Commander, the two mecha clans we met all had around 10,000 people. I feel that in this place, the default for a mecha clan is 10,000 people. The secondary commander, Ban Dongwu's voice sounded on Zhao Jun's team channel. Yes, that should be right. Zhao Jun had the same thought too. Once we meet our opponent, it will be a little tough for 2,000 of us to fight with 10,000 of them. Pan Dongwu frowned slightly. Although he believed in the abilities of his clan members and felt that they could fight with 3 opponents at once, fighting with 5 opponents was still too frightening. Once there was too much pressure on his clan members, they might not be able to perform to their best, and this could cause a huge number of casualties. It was a consequence both he and Zhao Jun couldn't handle. If we don't even have the courage to do this, why are we here? Zhao Jun replied calmly. A part of his mecha clan consisted of his original team members, but most of them were experienced mecha operators moved over from the other mecha brigades. Moreover, they were the most powerful batch of mecha operators that moved over. Many of them were veteran mecha operators from the original 250 mecha clan. They knew that Boss was in trouble, so they voluntarily agreed to be moved. Some were the mecha operators who used to be stationed at Base 013. They managed to survive due to the protection from Boss. Yan 3 was a public figure, so he couldn't move here. If not, he might have fought with Zhao Jun for the position of regiment commander. All in all, Zhao Jun went through a whole series of struggles and fights in order to clear a blood path to come to the lawless lands. 1398 hate fighting. In the conference room of the Rainbow Palace, Li Lan, Luo Zhao and Han Xueya were busy with their work. Ling Lan sat in the main seat of the room, holding her head with her hand with her eyes closed. Han Xueya, who was using the newly invented optical supercomputer to receive signals, had a look of joy on her face as she received a signal. She immediately deciphered the signal and walked beside Linglan after organizing the information. Boss, this is the first battle report from the battlefield on the front lines. Han Xueya handed over the document in her hands. Ling Lan opened her eyes and took the document. She looked at it and her mouth instantly pouted. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Li Lan, who was sitting beside her, was studying the map of the area of Komoda. Even though he was not looking at Ling Lan, he could sense the change in pressure coming out from Ling Lan's body, so he immediately raised his head to ask her what was wrong. Yeah. Zhao Jun and one of Lord Li's mecha teams encountered each other. Ling Lan handed the document in her hand to Li Lan. He decided to face them head-on. Zhao Jun always fights like that. Plus, if they've already encountered each other, if they don't fight head-on, It will make us look weak." Li Lan smiled as he gave an explanation for his friend. "He's in the jungle area." Ling Lan sent a side glance at Li Lan. It was as though she wanted to see just how much Li Lan could make the situation sound better. Li Lan's smile instantly froze. Luckily, he was someone who was adept at being shameless. It's because of the mindset of everyone in the jungle that gives him an inherent advantage. While everyone is setting up ambushes in the dark, he would crush them through brute force in broad daylight. "Perhaps there will be a surprise." "Okay, I'll wait to see that surprise you mentioned." Ling Lan didn't expose Li Lan for forcing the fact. Although she was somewhat unsatisfied with Zhao Jun's decision, she still decided to not do anything about it. The most she would do was to drag him back into the training room after he comes back to sharpen him. As for whether he would be hanging near death's door, it would depend on Ling Lan's mood at the time. Li Lan could only give Ling Lan a faint smile. What could he do? Zhao Jun was his friend. Even if he knew that the decision Zhao Jun made wasn't optimal, shouldn't he, as his friend, back him up? Ling Lan stopped talking about this topic. After all, Zhao Jun was the only one who knew the real reason why he made such a decision. She couldn't just sit here and make a judgment for him. If she did, why did she even delegate her powers in the first place? Ling Lan decided that afterwards, when Zhao Jun would send her the complete report, she would analyze it again. Ling Lan went into deep thought. While doing so, her fingers rhythmically tapped the table. This finger tapping thing was a habit she had inherited from her father, and it would show itself when she was deep in thought. When the sounds of tapping entered everyone's ears, everyone subconsciously softened their steps. They were afraid of making any noise that might affect boss's train of thought. Suddenly, Ling Lan raised her head and looked towards Luo Zhao, who held the secretary position, and asked, "Luo Zhao, does Zhao Jun have enough medics and medicinal agents with him?" Department Head Li equipped Regiment Commander Zhao with S-level equipment. "As long as they don't go over the top, it should be enough to hold until the battle royale finishes," replied Luo Zhao. "S-level, that's 2 Nuwa agents for every mecha operator." Ling Lan nodded and then turned towards Li Lan. "Lan, you know Zhao Jun best. Do you think Zhao Jun would go too over the top in this battle royale?" Ling Lan put more emphasis on "too." It was clear that Ling Lan knew that Zhao Jun would do something over the top, but she didn't just to what extent. Zhao Jun, when he's calm, he's very calm. When he needs to go crazy, he goes really crazy. So, I can't really give you a definite answer. Li Lan frowned. He and Qi Long, once they go into battle mode, they're both hot-blooded and even insane. However, the source of their hot-bloodedness and insanity are completely different from each other. Qi Long honestly enjoys the thrill that a fight brings him. Watching Qi Long fight, no matter how crazy or difficult it is, we are able to sense the excitement and exhilaration from Qi Long. Additionally, his special physical constitution and innate talent makes him very suitable for prolonged fights, and the longer he fights the higher the chance of him getting an epiphany to become stronger. After saying all that, a look of envy fell upon Li Lan's eyes. That special physical constitution was something everyone looked towards with jealousy. But Zhao Jun isn't like that. His hot-bloodedness and insanity are forced onto himself. It could even be said that he hates fighting, despite giving people the impression that he loves to fight. Li Lan's gaze was stern. After knowing Zhao Jun for so many years and being his friend for more than 10 years, Li Lan, who was naturally good at digging deeper into things, of course saw through what was hidden within Zhao Jun's heart. Li Lan's shocking words stunned Luo Lang and Hong Xuya, and their stunned state was not without reason. In Lingshan, if anyone was asked which regiment commander liked to fight the most, they would rank Qi Long, Zhao Jun and Luo Lang as the top 3 candidates. However, Li Lan's words completely shattered their perception of Zhao Jun. However, Ling Lan wasn't surprised by this. "I've sensed this in the past. It's just that it's Zhao Jun's personal matter and I shouldn't talk about it." All in all, it's still because of his family background. The identity of a commoner caused his starting point to be extremely low, but luckily, his outstanding talents shine through, causing his family to put all their hope onto him. Additionally, Being in a poor third-rate planet forced Zhao Jun to depend on himself and climb up the ranks one by one, while under immense pressure, in order to become stronger. Sometimes he could only go towards danger, explained Li Lang. After hearing the explanation, Luo Zhao's eyes brightened. That's why he does the same thing as elder brother Qi Long. He forces himself to fight in order to get stronger. Li Lang nodded. Yes, many times Zhao Jun would force himself towards his limit in the hopes of finding a way to become stronger, whether it is improving his sense of combat or his proficiency in mecha piloting. He isn't like Qi Long who enjoys fighting because of the thrill. It was instead reality forcing him to fight. Luo Zhao had a sad look on her face. The image of a lonely child appeared in her mind. A child had nothing and could only fight and fight, bleed and bleed, in order to strengthen himself until he finally got accepted into the first men's military academy. This is the reason why he couldn't control his titled domain-level technique yet. Forcing himself to fight would in the end become the devil in his heart, Ling Lance said calmly. Perhaps this battle royale will give Zhao Jun a chance to rid himself of that problem. Li Lang's eyes instantly brightened. Really? Ling Lan nodded. There are opportunities. I protected you guys too much in the past. Although you guys were safe, it also decreased your chances of growing on your own. When Zhao Jun understands the burden of bearing the responsibility of the lives of thousands of people on his own shoulders, the problem with the way he does things will be resolved. 1399 Judging. Zhao Jun held the control stick tightly in his hand. Sweat was coming out of his hand continuously before evaporating in an instant. Zhao Jun was nervous. There seemed to be a huge problem weighing down on his heart. At first, he thought that there was nothing he was frightened of. However, when he had to give the order for his team to fight with a mecha clan that vastly outnumbered them, Zhao Jun suddenly realized he wasn't as fearless as he thought. Although he had been through countless torturous battles and had fearlessly led his mecha team to fight on the first line of offense, he realized he could do all those war godlike hacks because he had comrades he could trust behind him, and at any time he was no longer able to withhold any longer. His trusty comrades would lead reinforcements to save him. Because he had this confidence, he didn't feel any pressure. He just needed to focus on fighting. However, now, in this unfamiliar Komoda district, where he had no reinforcements, he could feel the chilling wind blowing behind him. Moreover, in the past battles, boss or the strategists would be the ones giving the direction. He was just an executor. Yet, at this moment, he had to measure all the possibilities and make a decision with no one helping him. Whether it was right or wrong, it was his decision to make. If it was right, everything would be still alright. If he made the wrong judgment, the entire mecha team would be annihilated. Zhao Jun finally understood what responsibilities a regiment commander had to endure. Would they really be able to fight against 5 enemies each? Zhao Jun hesitated. Regiment commander, our enemy is already less than 5 kilometers away from us. The leader of the scout team hastily reported. Should we fight or not? Cold sweat formed on Zhao Jun's forehead. Was he able to handle the trust of these 2,000 mecha masters? The pressure of failure was rapidly creeping up on him. Regiment commander, they're already 4 kilometers away. Mecha moved at a very fast speed. Within a short time, they had shortened the distance by 1 kilometer. Zhao Jun, don't be nervous, think about boss. What would he do? Zhao Jun violently grabbed his control stick with his left hand, but his right hand was still trembling. I don't create trouble, but that doesn't mean that I'm afraid of trouble. Since some people aren't afraid of death and have come to offend us, let's kill them all. In his mind, Ling Lan's indifferent voice flooded his mind. Boss was never afraid. Since there has to be a fight, let's not think about how to evade it. What I should think about is how to exterminate the other party and eliminate all future troubles. Yes, boss never backed down. He liked to solve their problems once and for all. He wouldn't forgive their enemies. The chance of us winning is more than 50%. Why not take the bet? That's right, boss was a decisive person. No matter how bad their situation was, he would be able to lead everyone and cleared a path for themselves. Zhao Jun, I believed you. The voice of Boss when he was passing the leadership of the Mecha clan to him came up in his mind. This was what he said. Yes, Boss always believed in them, even if they made a huge mistake. Even if he punished them heavily, the trust he had in them never diminished. That's right, since Boss trusts me, Zhao Jun, why don't you trust yourself? Zhao Jun suddenly smiled brightly. Deep down in his heart, he hated this kind of endless battle. However, as long as his comrades were fighting, as long as everyone needed him, he wouldn't retreat from the front lines. Since Boss trusts me, Zhao Jun, why can't you trust them? The first half of the sentence was the same as before, but the last part was different. The former was him judging himself while the latter was him questioning himself. Everyone, split up and cooperate with each other for an ambush. A glimmer of decisiveness showed Zhao Jun's eyes. He gave the order to fight without hesitation. Yes. The leaders of all the teams received his command. Soon, the mechas started splitting up. Each team went to search for the best ambush location. To facilitate their ambush, the chameleon system would be constantly activated. In the far corner, Lord Li's 10,000-men mecha clan was rushing in their direction quickly. On the way here, they didn't sense anything amiss here. Anything up front? Every mecha clan had a team of scouts scouting the situation in front of them. Lord Li's army placed high importance on their frontline scouting. Every kilometer they moved, the strategist of the regiment commander would ask the scouts about any changes up front. No enemy mecha clans have been discovered currently. Although the jungle zone was known to have a lot of ambushes, their radar and other reconnaissance equipment all showed that it was safe. Everyone, be careful. Based on the news given by the command center, we should be meeting an army from Lord Xin or Lord Zhen if we head in this direction. The voice of their regiment commander appeared in their channel to remind them. I sure hope those two teams won't work together. One of the team leaders was a little worried as he said, it shouldn't be possible. Lord Xin and Lord Zhen's relationship isn't good, so the relationships of their subordinates are bad too. It's rare to see them getting along harmoniously, someone refuted. That's in the past. I heard that Lord Xin supported the new Lord Zhen in taking over the new position. One of the team leaders seemed to have some ways of getting secret intel. That's impossible, right? How can our Lord Li watch Lord Zhen expand his influence without doing anything? Another team leader refuted the idea again. Their relationship with Lord Zhen was quite bad. Although it wasn't as bad as the relationship with the old Lord Zhen, it wasn't any better either. As for why Lord Li and Lord Xin had such a bad relationship, we have to talk about their domain concept. The latter had the lightning element while the former had the fire element. Both of them wished for the title of the most powerful offense domain concept. The two lords wouldn't bow down to each other, so after a few altercations, the relationship turned sour. Stop talking nonsense. Even if their relationship is good, they might not cooperate. They are for sure guarded against each other. One of the team leaders saw through the lords. There might be alliances formed during a battle royale, but everyone knew your ally this year might be your enemy the next year. No one would maintain a working relationship partner whom they collaborated with for only a few days. Everyone just appeared harmonious on the surface. Sometimes, for the sake of benefits, they would play dirty with one another. As long as they don't cooperate, we are not afraid of anyone. Another team leader said arrogantly. He was boasting. In these few years, Lord Li had always owned the territory of Komoda because he was always on the winning side of the battle royale. Their mecha clan might not be the first among all of Lord Li's mecha clan, but they were among the top 3. He had never lost for the past few years. It was understandable that they felt proud of themselves. Okay, stop chatting. Even if there's no situation reported up front, everyone still has to be careful. The regiment commander appeared and ended this conversation. At this moment, a portion of the mechas had already entered Zhao Jun's ambush zone. Leader. After seeing so many mechas coming over, the team members that were hiding in front started feeling restless. There's no need to hurry. Let them leave. Their leader was very calm. Only a small portion of the mechas had entered their trap. If they revealed their fangs now, they wouldn't be able to achieve the greatest result. They needed to bear with it for a while longer. In Lingshan, Once you got on the battlefield, all the mecha operators would have to listen to their team leaders unconditionally. The ranking system must be abided strictly. Anyone that dared to break the rule would be punished. The punishment was enough to ensure that they lived in hell every day in the future. The mecha operators knew this, so after their team leaders spoke, no one said anything else. They controlled their impatience and waited silently. 1400, a heaven-defying cheat code. After lying prone there waiting patiently until their bones were about to creak from exhaustion, finally, most of the opposing mecha army had entered their trap. Seeing that none of them had been discovered yet, the team leader let out a minute sigh of relief. The sigh of relief coming out of his body was like a burden on his heart being slowly lifted. It felt as though he had been liberated and was ready to fight to the bitter end. With his whole heart and soul being all geared up to fight, he let out a magnified roar that traveled through the whole jungle. As his roar died out, shadows started raining down on the unsuspecting mecha army. While they were raining down the air, silver sheens of light were falling along with them. To prevent their opponents from discovering them from using infrared equipment, they didn't bring any heat-generating weapons, which meant they were executing this ambush with only cold weapons. Before long, a scene of massacre and desolation followed with the descent of the silver sheens. In the back of their minds, they knew this day might possibly be their end, but they did not agree with that notion, so they would fight and fight until they were the only ones left standing. Regiment commander's orders: once the Nuwa agents are finished, we will retreat from the front lines. As the gruesome fight carried on, it naturally would get more intense, and as such it was inevitable that mecha operators on Zhao Jun's side would get hurt in the process. Once someone sustained any life-threatening injuries, they would be sent back to the medics to be injected with the life-saving Nuwa agent, and after a few minutes of rest, they would jump right back on their feet and continue to fight. However, even with such a powerful lifeline, it was still limited in supply. And thus it was why Zhao Jun ordered his men to stop when they ran out of such powerful medicinal agents. Although Zhao Jun's mecha clan was outnumbered by the enemy by 5 times the amount, they still managed to grasp the overall tempo of the fight as they were able to get the jump on the enemy first. Moreover, with their powerful combat ability and with the help of the Nuwa agent, they continued controlling the tempo of the fight within a tight grasp, and thus the situation started tilting in Zhao Jun's favor. With their unrelenting spirit and seemingly undying status, the feeling of fear started to spread across the whole army. As the number of comrades on their side got fewer and fewer, that feeling of fear took over their already erratic mind. Before the commander could even order a retreat, a portion of the mecha operators already had a mental breakdown. They actually started running away. Once one mecha operator started to flee in fear, it caused a domino effect within the others as they all started slowly taking steps back before fully running in a mad dash. Soon, Zhao Jun's mecha clan started to wake up from their semi-blood crazed state. As they looked around the jungle, they realized the ground was littered with corpses and dyed with blood. They look around their vicinity, but not a single enemy in sight. They were worried that the enemy would take the fun away from them. Zhao Jun did try and chase after the fleeing enemies, but when he realized that they were going towards the flatlands, he decisively called back his mecha operators and hid back in the jungle. Zhao Jun won this battle, but the number of agents on his hands were severely depleted. The more saddening fact was that casualties were sustained. Although only 3 mecha operators had died, it was enough to sadden their comrades. Although the Nuwa agent was able to save a person's life even if they were at the brink of death, if you were unlucky enough to get hit in the fatal spot, you would die immediately. No amount of Nuwa agent would be able to save your life. This was the situation the 3 casualties faced. However, these mecha operators grew up on the battlefield. They were used to saying farewell to their comrades. After they grieved for a while, they recovered from their grief and started clearing up the battlefield. They sharpened the weapons and started searching for any survivors from their enemy's side. Based on the rules of the lawless lands, if these survivors weren't saved by their surviving comrades or some sort of reinforcement, once the battle ended, they would become slaves of the winner. Zhao Jun and his men knew clearly that boss lacked everything, including men. The more capable slaves they captured, the better it was for Boss. Of course, to ensure their safety, these slaves were chased away from Zhao Jun's mecha clan by some of his men to be locked up in a temporary location. There would be a small mecha team stationed there watching over them. Regiment commander, how are we going to act after this? The team leaders couldn't wait for their next fight after they tasted their first success. Zhao Jun pondered for a while. He said, "Control this jungle first. Close all entry and exits." Huh? We're not fighting anymore? The team leaders were a little disappointed. "I've thought about this carefully. I don't think that Boss sent 2,000 of us into Komoda to fight on the front line." Zhao Jun said, "That was the mission of the Mecha army directly under the previous Lord Zhen and Lord Zen. Then what do we do? Be an onlooker?" One of the team leaders asked curiously. "No, we're going to completely crush our defeated enemy." Zhao Jun smiled. "I see. Anyone that was able to become a team leader wasn't stupid." Hence, the team leaders instantly understood Zhao Jun's ambiguous words. When both sides suffer heavy losses, it will be the time we act. Excitement was seen in Zhao Jun's eyes. Fortunately, he got enlightened just in time. If not, he might have died to pay for his mistake. "Boss," news finally came back from Zhao Jun's side. Han Xuya, who had always been waiting for the result of the fight, jumped up in excitement immediately when she received a report back from Zhao Jun. Li Lan, who had always been calm and composed, couldn't control himself either. He stood up and shouted, "Hurry up and say it." "We won completely. We destroyed more than 4,200 enemy mechas and gained a total of 4,577 prisoners. 2,800 mechas escaped, but 3 mecha operators on our side died." When she read the last past, Han Xuya's voice sounded slightly dejected. However, she regained her composure quickly. Compared to what they had gained, these deaths were negligible. Luo Zhao, who was worried at the start, gave a bright smile when Han Xuya read the result of the fight. It looks like Zhao Jun didn't fight with his opponent directly. He at least used tactics. Li Lan smiled as he said, "Based on Zhao Jun's intelligence, he should have thought about using tactics, but there was still the possibility of Zhao Jun going crazy and ordering his men to fight the enemy head-on. But, luckily, that didn't happen." The only person that remained indifferent was Ling Lan. When she heard the result, there was no change in her emotion. She just asked calmly, "Ask Zhao Jun what he plans to do after this." Han Xuya immediately sent Ling Lan's inquiry over to Zhao Jun. Within 1 second, Zhao Jun gave his reply. "Wait and see. Bear the fruits of other people's labor." After hearing Zhao Jun's reply, Ling Lan gave a light smile. It looked like Zhao Jun had understood how to become an outstanding regiment commander. "Very good, Li Lan." Ling Lan shifted her cold gaze towards Li Lan. This was the look of a person who had been accustomed to hold a bunch of power and authority. Li Lan stood up straight. "Yes, immediately lead 2 medical battle teams to reinforce Zhao Jun." Ling Lan knew clearly that Zhao Jun lacked all kinds of medical agents at this moment, especially the Nuwa agent. Nuwa agents must be the main reason why there were so few casualties. Without the Nuwa agent, at least half of Zhao Jun's mecha clan might have died in order to take down a 10,000-men mecha army. A fight was tough, especially when you wanted to fight against an enemy that had overwhelming numbers. If he didn't have those agents, the price he had to pay for a victory would be expensive and tragic. At this thought, Ling Lan was glad that she decisively took Li Shu under her wing. This decision allowed Ling Shan, as well as her, to have the most heaven-defying cheat code. More lives. Ling Lan felt that this cheat code was on par with Little Four, maybe even more useful than him. With a Nuwa agent in hand, she could own the entire world. Little Four cried sadly, "You can't just throw me into the dusty corner just because I'm in a coma. No, I must wake up immediately to prove that I'm the most useful and heaven-defying cheat code." "Li Shu, you bastard, move to the side." Sob. "I understand it now. Li Shu must be my natural enemy. He wants to take away my position as the most important underling to Boss." "How irritating." "Yes." The moment Li Lan replied, He disappeared from the spot. The medical teams had already finished their preparations. They were just waiting for Ling Lan's order. Luo Zhao and Han Xuya left the meeting room and started getting busy with their work. When Ling Lan was left alone, she slowly opened her hands, revealing her completely wet palm.